And just in the nick of time, all three of us are here for the start of the show. This is pretty miraculous, I would say. Although we are, I guess, 15 minutes late overall, but could be much worse. Could be much worse. Howdy. I was gonna say howdy. I've never said howdy once in my entire life. I don't know why that was the first thing that came to mind to say. But hello to all you mixed media people out there, mixed media fans, people who tune in every week. I know there's not like a heaping crowd of you, but there are a few of you, and we appreciate you so much for joining us for a few hours to enjoy and talk about some of our favorite things. And if you're new, if you don't know what mixed media is, it's a weekly live stream podcast, and we talk about our favorite things, which are, all art related, but particularly in our particular disciplines in art, whether that's film, music, or gaming, or things adjacent to those things at all. You'll find a deep catalog if you go back into our channel of a bunch of really random seeming topics about all those things, and I think you'll enjoy it, and you'll increase in your depth of knowledge of our particular disciplines and how they interact, which is the name of the game of the show. But before we talk about our weeks, talk about what we're going to be talking about today, we should introduce ourselves. So my name is Irving Nestor. I'm a filmmaker and media entrepreneur. I own a company called Ariella based out of Mount Carmel, Pennsylvania.
Hi, I'm Ben Costello. I'm a flute player and media composer.
Oh, no. Sorry. I was muted, I forgot. I'm Nathan Nestor. I'm a 3D modeler and video game developer.
Sweet. Yep. And that makes us Mixed Media, our three co-hosts here. So before we, again, talk about some stuff, got to give a shout-out to four awesome people. That's Rob Sharma, 909 Crime, Post, who is back on the web. I did not realize he was taking a web vacation, which is what I've been saying, where's Post this whole time. But we've got Post back, and we've got K Kairos. All those people have social media. If you look up those names, you'll probably find them. And I highly encourage that you do. They post some just interesting, random, but, good stuff. So, yeah. And gotta also give a shout out where all those people are and more. Our Discord. So if you go to the link in the description, you'll find a Discord. That's kind of our little clubhouse. While we're not live streaming, we talk about stuff over on there. And yeah, I think it's all the housekeeping I've got to do. So yeah, how are you guys? How are you guys' weeks?
It was all right. I went to a 70s themed birthday party, which was interesting. Unfortunately, I did not win best costume, but yeah.
Whoa. Also, is there a picture?
Yeah.
Is it a picture you're comfortable sharing?
Yeah, give me a second.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I was like, looking for 70s clothes. I was looking for very generic, like whatever casual 70s clothes. Believe it or not, it's hard to find. They don't sell those anymore. So it's been 50 years or something. So that style's a little bit out of date. Trying to find the image. What was I gonna say? Right. So I ended up going to a vintage clothing store 30 minutes away, and the day of the party. So it's very sketchy. It was very sketchy. I tried the day before. I tried a thrift shop. I was told that would work. It did not work. They had modern clothes, So, here, I'll put it in stream media.
Okay.
Oh, I don't know how to say it's in a text message. Well, I gotta save it first to my phone and then send it over.
Nice. Well, while you're doing that, wait, was that it that happened in your week, or?
I guess so, yeah.
While you're doing that, Ben, how was your week?
Good. I think the most interesting musical thing, I know last week I was talking a lot about historical flutes, and actually this past, I guess, Saturday, I went with my parents to the anniversary commemoration of the Battle of Fort Stevens, kind of this important July 1964 defense of the capital, Washington D.C. In the Civil War from Jeb Stuart's invading army. A really important moment in the war. But the theme of that the celebration this year was music in the Civil War.
Oh.
It was quite fascinating. It's like about 4 hours of historical performances, variety of different things. Like kind of home music, like kind of music, small ensemble that like Lincoln would have heard in the White House. Various kinds of military ensembles. Some people who do a lot of like historical reproductions of gospel singing from that era. Yeah, probably. I think there's some other things too that I'm forgetting, but really fascinating. Listening to, truly authentic original music on a lot of times, literally, period instruments. Very interesting kind of glimpse into the American musical world of, the 1860s, the Civil War era.
Pretty neat, yeah. Yeah, that's pretty cool. When does the first audio recordings come about then?
I think like maybe I want to say like 1879 maybe, but 1880s the latest, because I know we have a recording of like Brahms saying this is Dr. Johannes Brahms. We have a recording of Tchaikovsky and some of his friends.
Wait, but not his music.
No.
Oh, no. Come on.
We have a recording of Tchaikovsky and some of his friends who are just like at some kind of party, or they're mimicking being at a party, and they're all like saying random like nonsense phrases. Yeah. So
I wonder if just like the concept of recording music just was like not even in their mind, Like,
well, I mean, it's certainly. I think by the 1890s, there's some like really late 1890s. There are some attempts to record music, probably earlier than that too. But I know, like for instance, I was talking last week about a particular Russian flute player, the first like Russian-born flute player in an important Russian orchestra, and he made recordings in 1901.
Wow.
So, I had to imagine that there are some earlier things than that. But yeah, probably in the very first years, like the late 1880s, when Brahms and Tchaikovsky were making these sort of recordings, it was kind of more of a novelty than like a kind of thing you could really easily use to record music. Right? Like I said, they're just making like nonsense phrases. Tchaikovsky and his friends. It's like,
what is this?
Kind of like it's a novelty item, I guess.
What is this selfie you speak of? It's like that kind of.
I was just thinking, kind of reminds me of like something you might find on a TikTok almost.
Yeah. That's funny. Yeah, my week was it was okay. A bit busy. Actually, very busy, extraordinarily busy. Was that the week? Did I mention that the pizza place came back in play last week?
No.
Okay, well, it's back in play. I walked away from the deal before because the guy was being insane with his valuation of the property, which if you heard where we ended at negotiations, you'd probably be like, that's a steal. Not in this region. It's not a steal. And I do have to account for the region because, the value of the property over time, matters. So he came back to us on his hands and no, I'm just kidding. Begging. No, I'm just kidding. But he came back to us after he supposedly had lines of people out the door to buy his property, even though it had been listed for like over 60 days. And the reason for that is because it was way overpriced. He came back to us with a much more reasonable offer before he was going to go back to market with it. So that caused the whole week to get hijacked by negotiations back and forth, talking to my lender. And so it looks like I'm much closer to buying this pizza place. I've accepted his last offer, basically, which was reasonable, but there's a few hoops to jump through before I can definitively say I'm buying that place, which is kind of insane. So there's going to be a lot of cool stuff happening there, and hopefully it'll be very good for the community. That's like, that's a big portion of what this property is about, is hopefully helping the community. So I'm really hyped and excited about that.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. Sounds like a really interesting opportunity.
Yeah, there's if it does go through, I don't want to talk about it too much because it could still fall through. But these things are going to take a few months to resolve. So we'll see. But there is going to be some cool projects going forward with that. And then the other thing was I spent a lot of time practicing drone work, and I should have uploaded some of it to my computer. Oh, that's so unfortunate. I could have showed you guys. But the first shot I took of my drone was so magical. Complete by accident. I just flew the drone up. I was like, let me go up to my max height, because it's really scary when you're flying something for the first time. And it's not as scary because you're scared of hurting someone. It's a little bit more scary because you're flying $1,000 around, and if it gets stuck somewhere, like you can't retrieve it, If it gets stuck in a tree, maybe I could get the fire department to help me if I don't know, maybe, potentially. My drone stuck in a tree would be the call, I guess.
Get Mr. Incredible to help you.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But it's a little scary when you're flying it around, when you know that if you crash it, there's the prospects of replacing it, it sucks. So yeah, but been getting some randomly beautiful footage, because basically everything aerial I've learned is beautiful. You just get these you get angles that you can't get, and I think that's pretty awesome, and hopefully a good arsenal for the vlogging game as well. So happy about that. And the last thing I want to say, because I forgot to share this last week, but I have my first. This is obligatory for a filmmaker to own a Super 8 camera. Of course, I need to have one of these. You have to have a Super 8. If you don't have a Super 8, then you're not a filmmaker. That's the laws of physics.
What is a Super 8 exactly?
It's a it's an old film camera that shoots in Super 8 format, which is it's like 8mm, but slightly. It's augmented so that audio goes in a specific spot on the strip, and boring details. But that format was very revolutionary because it allowed a lot of people to do home video with small camcorders like this one. I bought this at an estate sale, complete steal. I bought it for, I believe, $20.
Nice.
Yeah, and I think I looked it up. What this exact model, if you were to buy it on eBay, $150. So pretty good deal, I think. And so I just need some film, some Super 8, to put in here. And the lens looks crazy. It's got a crazy blue film thing. I don't know if I focus on this, not my face. Okay, there we go. It's got some crazy blue weird stuff on it. I don't know how it's gonna look like, but hopefully it'll be cool.
Is it in good working condition?
I hope so. So one of the things I checked was I looked inside at the internal, and it looks like it was completely unused.
Oh wow,
it's literally mirror polish on the inside. So it makes me think that it must be working, unless it came out the factory not working. Oh, actually, I got it for $15. I didn't realize that.
Where'd you get it from?
An estate sale.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, that's gonna be fun. I'm probably almost certainly gonna be doing a YouTube video that's gonna be some sort of I don't know, 3-minute short film in Super 8 or something. It should be fun, and some behind the scenes of how that goes. Yeah.
Nice.
Yep. All right. Wait. Actually, Nathan, did you? Oh, you put the picture. Oh, wow. You look like a GTA character.
Oh wow, I do actually. Now I think about it. Wow.
Oh my gosh, this is great. Hold on, I have to show you guys. This is amazing.
Yeah. So when I went to that store, right, she was like, okay, here are like there are like five. I was like, I was looking. I told her I was looking for the person who was like, it was a really small store, so there was only one person in there working, and I told her I was looking for like 70s clothes. She's like, oh, here's what we have, and she points to the section of like 5 disco uniforms. I was like, I was looking for something more casual. I was like, okay, okay, all right, but like, do you have anything more casual? She goes, no. I'm like, oh. I guess we're going to disco. So
here it is. Oh, why is it showing so weird?
Why is it cropped like that?
Yeah, that's strange. Oh, come on. All right, we need to get this large.
Oh, there it is. It's kind of better.
Yeah, we'll just cover the whole screen. There we go. There it is.
Yeah, there you go.
There is Nathan in 70s galore.
Yeah.
But he didn't grow a fro for it.
Quite eye-catching.
Yeah, so that's I considered buying one, right? Like a fake afro thing. I was like, I don't know how 70s people are gonna dress. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if they're gonna actually wear. People did bring afros. Like, okay, I guess I could have brought one. but yeah.
Nice. Sweet. How about news in your media spheres?
I'm gonna save mine for my segment because what I was initially, I'm like, this is my news for the week. I'm like, wait, no, I should just talk about this for an extended period of time. So I'll save mine.
Okay. Cool. Let's see here. Well, actually, Nathan, do you have news first? Because I'm looking up something.
Yeah, sure. Team Fortress 2 hit a new peak player count after 15 years of existing. It's kind of crazy. It peaked at where is it? There it is. It peaked at 253,000 concurrent players. That was sometime earlier this week, I think. The reason being is that TF2 got a big update. I'm not sure how, if I am reading things correctly, it seems like this update is just far larger than any other update that usually happens. It's a limited time event, so a bunch of the stuff that's new will be removed once it's over. So I guess that's kind of why a lot of people were trying to play as soon as possible. But yeah, I think it ends in September. It's the summer event. Adds 14 new maps, 25 new quote community contributed items. I don't know what that means. I assume like maybe skins and stuff like that. 6 taunts, 20 quote new community created unusual effects with unusual capitalized. I don't know what that means. And some other stuff, some smaller stuff. But yeah, it's been 15 years. I think technically 16 years, something like that, since TF2 came out and launched on the Xbox 360 and PS3. So we're a few console generations away from that now. And yeah, still hit a peak player count greater than most games that have ever
crazy
been made. So yeah, it's kind of crazy. Yeah, it's kind of weird because like currently TF2 is the 3rd most played game on Steam by concurrent players at the moment. Right, it's sitting at 151,000. It's crazy the scaling because you go from 151K at Team Fortress 2, it's a lot, right, to 300K for Dota 2. A game that I've never heard a single person say they play. I don't know how that's possible. So that's double. And then from that you get CSGO, which also peaked somewhat recently. I think it peaked in May. Again, at 1.5 million concurrent players. I don't know if that had to do with the... I don't know if I mentioned this before. That would have been news, I should have said at some point. But if I missed it, sorry. But Counter-Strike 2 was announced, which is very strange naming considering there are like a trillion Counter-Strikes. But yeah, Counter-Strike 2 was announced maybe around May. I don't know. That might sound about right. So that might be why the game was hyped all of a sudden. It's like, oh, we might have limited time to play this game, this classic game, So let's get on that. I know the last CS:GO major happened not that long ago in France. Yeah. Oh, also the Rocket League finals happened. I posted about it on Discord. I think what's the one team called? I think they're French. Vitality, is that what they're called? Something with a V, something like that. They won. So yeah.
Nice. Interesting. So for me, it relates to my topic, so I'm not going to cover it too much. But I guess this is kind of personal news, but bleeds into my topic. Was I saw Sound of Freedom Saturday, and I finally got back out to the theater. If you don't know, the theater's like 30 minutes away from me, so it's very irritating to go to the movies. So I finally got out there because I had some time, and this film kept popping up in my feed, and I was like, okay, just got to go see it now. And just some more box office numbers. They in their second week, which was the weekend that I saw it, the film grossed $27 million, which was the second most. So it beat Indiana Jones in the second weekend, and
Wow.
yeah, it didn't beat Mission Impossible, which premiered that weekend. So it lost to Mission Impossible, of course. But
And that makes that's expected.
yeah, exactly. But pretty respectable. The total gross right now is $85 million, which at the pace that they're going right now, if they keep that pace, they should have a very healthy profit at the end, as long as they keep the pace. I actually don't know the film's budget. I should probably look at that. But it's the 18th highest grossing film this year, right behind The Flash. So there you go. That's my news. Box office news.
Do you intend to see the Barbie Oppenheimer doubleheader?
Yes, actually, that's exactly what I intend to do. That's literally precisely what I intend to do: is see Barbie and Oppenheimer the same day, like literally.
All right.
It must be a long day at the theater, though, because I imagine Oppenheimer's really
Yes.
long.
Yeah, Nolan
know the
has no
runtime,
restraint
but-
on time anymore, so it's
Yeah,
probably.
I don't know what the announced runtime is, but I have to imagine it's long.
I actually don't know either. I should probably look that up. But if it's not at least 2.5 hours, then I'd be surprised. Barbie might have a lot more restraint.
Yeah. See, you can, like, I don't know. There's a certain point where, like, I'll give a pass to someone like Tarkovsky. But if it's not that, like, if it's going to be 2.5 hours or more, like, it needs to be good. I don't know
Yeah.
that I've ever sat through anything that long. I guess I watched Stalker in a theater. But otherwise, like, I had to take a break and, like,
We need to bring back the intermission. Come on, people. Films are getting longer because they're trying to... It makes a lot of... Everything that makes about films getting longer in the cinema specifically makes a lot of sense economically right now. I would like films to go up to 3 hours, but I want you to give us an intermission in between. Like, you have to do it for fatigue purposes, but people need to use the bathroom.
Yeah.
I think when I saw Stalker, there might have been an intermission.
Yeah, intermissions used to be super common, super common. If we make the cinema more like the theater RE theater, then then that'd be pretty good, I think.
Yeah, because a break, like an intermission built into it, and Andrei Rublev, which is like 3.5 hours, it's divided into like 6 parts. You could easily stop after like each of the 6 parts if you wanted to.
Yeah.
Straight to TV movies also, have built-in breaks. Not that they're necessarily the gold standard of movie, but it's at least possible.
Yeah, not quite. but I think just having a nice... I mean, it would encourage some good filmmaking, I think. I think intermissions can cause filmmakers to think a little bit differently about how communities experience a film. And I'm going to be talking about that, actually, when I talk about Sound of Freedom, because there's some interesting stuff in there, particularly at the very end of the end of the credits of the film that I really want to talk about. But... yeah, it could be good, and I'm gonna be doing an episode eventually. Maybe I don't know if it'll be next time or not, on reforming theaters and how we could do this properly and foreseeably and in a way that would be extremely helpful. And I'm seeing a revival start to happen, a small revival in the cinema. It was really, really crowded when I was there, for the size of the theater in particular. So, good stuff. We'll see. yeah, that's it for news, I suppose. And Kai's in the chat. Sup, Kai? I hope you're doing well. And by the way, anyone who's watching anywhere else on Rumble, on YouTube, on Twitch, you just have to chat. I'll see your chat on Rumble. I know it's not connected to Restream, but I'll see it in the live chat scroll thing. If you want to add your comments, feel free. It's a open live show, so live stream, live podcast. That's what I meant to say. So you can be part of the podcast too. It's not just you listening to us. It's a conversation. So yeah, feel free. With that, Ben's got his first topic, and I think we should just jump right into it.
All right.
All right, so here we go.
Mixed Media Music.
All right, welcome to Mixed Media Music, portion of Mixed Media podcast dedicated to discussions of music, a particular emphasis on film, media music, and on classical music. My name is Ben Costello. I'm a flute player and media composer. And I'm the main host for Mixed Media Music, and I'm assisted by my two co-hosts, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
So my name is Irving Nestor. I'm a filmmaker and media entrepreneur based out of Mount Carmel, Pennsylvania, and a company called Ariella.
And I'm Nathan Nestor. I'm a 3D modeler and video game developer.
All right. So today on Mixed Media Music, we are going to be talking about media composers and unionization. And this is a topic that, if you've watched this show for a long time, we've been at this, for like 2 years now?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. I think I've alluded to this a couple of times, but
Definitely.
this is now the time to really dig into this topic. Because, well, one major piece of like filmic news this past week is that the actors, SAG-AFTRA, right? Basically the Actors Guild, Screen Actors Guild, joined with the Writers Guild and also went on strike, which is kind of crippling Hollywood right now. And as a result of that, the film composer world, which has long been fascinated with the topic of unionization, it seems like online that is all that anybody wants to talk about, from like the biggest names in the industry down to people who aren't anything in the industry yet.
Before you continue, Ben,
yeah.
Have you noticed the episode artwork talking about big people?
Yeah. I'm gonna guess that's like John Williams on strike or something like that. Yeah,
it was John Williams leads a protest or something like that.
Okay, there you go. I got this John Williams and obviously striking, protesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a really massive topic, and I'm gonna talk about two things. So one is why, like, what is the history of media composers unions? Why don't we have one now? And the second question is, if somehow we could have one now, why would we want one? If you're a media composer, why would you want to be part of a media composers union? And what are some of the challenges? Okay. So right now, as I've mentioned many times on this show, it's impossible for there to be a media composers union. And historically that is not the case, though. There have been two predecessor composers unions, and both were quite impactful in their day. But the main challenge is the legal issue. And we're gonna get to why that happened and what exactly happened legally. But in essence, in 1984, the National Labor Relations Board issued a ruling stating that media composers cannot unionize. I'm not eligible to unionize. And since then, there's been another massive push with a lot of top names in the industry, like Hans Zimmer, behind it, to try and re-establish a composers union, but they completely failed in that initiative because all the film studios said, "Look, it's already been proven to be illegal. There's no way we're going to deal with you, even if it somehow were to become legal, because we don't think it's legal." And right, okay, so that's important to understand about unions. There are two steps, right? To be an official union, you need to be given, I guess, granted permission, approval by the National Labor Relations Board, and you actually need whoever you are attempting to negotiate with to sign an agreement. Okay. So, going back in history here, and I have a lot of notes. Okay, so the first, what we have right now as a composer, in general, it applies to composers beyond just the media world, but for media composers, the main thing is there's something called SCL, or Society of Composers and Lyricists. And Society of Composers and Lyricists is kind of a guild-like organization that has no unionization power. It is descended from these earlier organizations that did actually function as a union in addition to being a guild. And I know we did have a long talk, I think this is Nathan's talk a couple of months ago about what a guild is. So if you want to check that out, I'm sure if you just look at Mixed Media Guild, you can get a full breakdown on what exactly a guild is, as opposed to a union. And you can have both, and a lot of these organizations really do function as guilds and unions. So yes, composers do have SCL, which is kind of a guild-like organization. Now globally, that's not what most other countries have. A lot of other countries either have dedicated composers unions, or their general musicians unions consider composers to be musicians. And I understand that people like who live in that kind of those parts of the world, like I think England is like that, UK, some of them don't necessarily love that because they feel like being just lumped in with musicians in general means they get less consideration for their unique line of work, as opposed to like everybody else who's a musician. And in the United States, a lot of the other people who do work in the musical realm, in the media world, like your session conductors, and your orchestrators, they are considered musicians. So they are part of, if they're unionized, they are, if they're union members, like your conductor and orchestrators, they are probably part of the American Federation of Musicians. Open to them, but not open to composers. And I don't know the exact reason for that, but I would imagine it's because they argue that, well, I'm not really sure why orchestrators would be, but conductor I understand, because conductors are also generally part of that, and like if you look at like your local orchestra, the musicians are, well, if it's a union orchestra, the musicians are unionized, and the conductor will also be part of the union. So conductor makes sense. They're directly like involved in producing live sounds. I don't know why orchestrators are musicians but composers are not. I'm sure there's some historical background to that, which I would have to look up, and that's probably a topic for some other day. Okay, so the history. So the predecessors to the Society of Composers and Lyricists that were actually unions goes back to 1945. In 1945, there's a introduction of this guild, just a union, not a guild, called the Screen Composers Association. And this was initially an idea because the American Society of Composers, Authors and Publishers, ASCAP, is a performance right organization. They didn't. They were not, apparently. The feeling is that they were not treating film music media. Well, there wasn't really any other kind of media music other than film in 1945. The feeling was that they were not treating that as an equal kind of economic product to any other kind of composition. So the composers working in Hollywood formed the Screen Composers Association. And again, pretty much every single working composer at Hollywood at the time was a member of that. In 1953, they decided to make it both kind of a union and a guild-like organization. So they had a new organization called Composers Guild of America. And then 2 years later, they added lyricists as well. So we have the Composers and Lyricists Guild of America. And they were ratified by the National Labor Relations Board in 1955, and they were able to enter an agreement with all the major film studios shortly after that. Apparently, so this is composers in Los Angeles and New York, and just for a sense of scale, though, pretty much they say that almost 100% of working media composers in 1955 were joined into this union, and they note that that was about 300, slightly over 360 composers. Okay, so just for a sense of scale, about 360 people in Los Angeles and New York working, full-time enough as composers to be members of this union. So I don't know exactly what the historical requirements for membership were, but people who have researched this quite extensively note that, in essence, their agreements with the film studios were very similar to the agreements between the studios and the Writers Guild and the Directors Guild, and that the organization itself was very similar to both of those organizations. So it's essentially the Composers and Lyricists Guild, equal to the Writers Guild that is currently on strike. And this organization, the Composers and Lyricists Guild of America, is actually pretty significant. My research has led me to believe for the way that they really promoted film music and later television music, which we'll get into, which is how they fell apart, but really promoting those things as an art form. And they were very dedicated to public performances of film scores. There's times that film scores were really broadly, publicly performed. Comes from a particular concert in, I think, 1970, 71. I may have the year wrong. This big concert at the Hollywood Bowl. And apparently this is kind of the first time that film music is really presented as something worthy of performance by an orchestra in a massive, public setting. So this union and guild gets kind of, that's its legacy, kind of bringing film music as an art form to the public. Okay, so the first real problem, though, for them is in 1971, where they decide that they're in particular concerned about television composers who are working for television, and the fact that composers don't have publication rights, something they still don't have.
Yeah.
And we can go back to maybe the second episode of this podcast, where I talked about how we have the need to publish scores, right? Like physical copies of scores, and how composers don't have the right to do that, and how these things just sit in a vault, and sometimes these vaults catch on fire, right? And oops, well, 50 years of film scores are just gone.
Well, question. I don't know. Maybe we went over this before, so I might be forgetting. What is the reason why they don't let them just publish scores? Like just the sheet music or whatever?
Right. The reason composers do not have that right is because they never had that right. It's just how the studios operated. I mean, they can give reasons why they would, want to maintain publication rights, studios, right? Obviously, they can make money off of it, right?
But they don't even try, is my understanding, right? They don't even
I was
attempt
saying,
to.
they don't. It doesn't seem like they
Well, they'll
often do,
try.
or else-
They'll try for some things. Like, yes, you can find a million books of Disney songs for easy piano or easy flute. They'll publish those things.
Yeah.
Why hold on to things like that they know that they're not even going to try it for, you know what I'm saying? Like, especially
Right.
imagine like a not like a relatively obscure movie, like kind of out of the public eye, for example, right? Not necessarily thinking it's going to have like the greatest score in the world, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yep.
why lock that down when no one, they know full well, it seems, that they're not going to even attempt to make money off of it.
Well, that way nobody else can make money off of it, even if they won't. Even if they won't take the effort into doing it, they can own it. So,
can you have certain things like a license that would allow you to publish it but not sell it commercially?
Well, then they lose. I don't know. With these people, I think it's a hoarding mentality. I don't think they don't have a particular plan. Their plan is to not allow anyone else to use it. That's the plan.
right, right. As long they probably would be more offended if you made money off of it than the fact that it's not making money for them. Right?
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
It reminds me of Nintendo.
So this is a quote from the president of the Composers and Lyricists Guild of America at the time, 1971. I think this is Racine, but I could be wrong. Who was the president at the time? But this is pretty much exactly what I said, 2 years ago. I think on the second episode of this podcast. So this is a direct quote from him. Thousands of musical compositions remain idle, unused, and unexploited in the files of the studios. Very true. Exactly the same way as it is today. So, unfortunately, this kind of becomes the death knell of composers' unions. Composers pushing for retaining publication rights. They actually went on strike in the, I think, beginning of December of 1971, and remained on strike until September of 1972. At which point, there was an agreement that said that composers who, under certain very tight circumstances, restrictive circumstances, could have some publication rights. But basically, but it was only retroactive, and I don't know all the conditions, but basically, almost nobody got anything. Okay, and nobody thereafter would get anything as well. Because of this, the guild and guild union, they sued, claiming that yes, so they had reached an agreement on this issue, but the studios were, illegally preventing, causing monetary damage to composers by this practice. Okay, so unfortunately, though, this litigation goes on for 7 years, with apparently it's a really complicated legal history, with various courts, tossing the issue around. And the two sides finally settled in 1979. But the real problem, though, for the Composers and Lyricists Guild of America is that this effort over 7 years basically cost so much money that the organization kind of collapsed. So it finally dissolved permanently in 1982. 2 years later, in 1984, the Society of Composers and Lyricists, which I mentioned, still exists today as a guild-like organization only. They came into existence to kind of build on, kind of coming out of the ashes of this old union. And they ran into issues with the National Labor Relations Board, which did not approve them as a union. And at the time, there's a lot of writing about this. There's a lot of commentary in Congress about this ruling as well. This is still during the Reagan administration, which Reagan administration, lots of issues with the unions, particularly the Air Traffic Controllers Union. So kind of an anti-union administration. And pretty much the feeling was that this ruling was only due to the fact that Reagan's appointees were so anti-union that they weren't going to approve anything. Apparently, there's some prominent members, Democratic members of Congress, who were very upset about this ruling and the precedent it set. But essentially, the ruling says that, and this is still, why composers cannot unionize. Their decision was that composers are not, they're not employees in the same sense that like pretty much everybody else on a film is. Okay, that because they function as almost like their own film production, essentially, because the composer is in charge of hiring the orchestra contractor. They're in charge of their own team. They are in charge of hiring the conductor and orchestrators. Now, my first question is, why are they responsible for that? They're responsible for that only because studios say they have to be.
Yeah.
And then that's not how most other aspects of film production work, right? The studio is responsible ultimately for hiring a lot of the individual people, in the respective departments. It's not like, well, the casting director is responsible for the associate casting directors, something like that.
Yeah.
So it is only that way because the studios don't care enough, and that's how it's always been. And they have no incentive to change that.
My question is, wouldn't this logic apply also to, even directors?
Yes, the directors had a guild.
But the directors have, I was going to say they have a guild.
Right. So the real issue is that the Composers and Lyricists Guild of America dissolved.
Yeah.
Right? Yes, you could apply this same logic to pretty much all these other guilds and unions in Hollywood, but they exist, and they're not going to be removed from existence.
Right.
And unfortunately, the Composers Guild is the only one that dissolved.
Yeah.
Because they were pushing for, I guess, too much, essentially, to retain publication rights. Okay. So, as I mentioned earlier, in 2009, the Association of Media Composers and Lyricists, which is backed by a lot of the biggest names in the industry, including Hans Zimmer, they teamed up with the Teamsters Union.
The Teamsters. That's crazy. Sorry. If you don't know, out there in the audience, the Teamsters are the most powerful union in the whole country, pretty much. And on film particularly, they have a very long and very complicated history as a film union. It's not a film union. It's a union of truckers. That's really what it is. But truckers have such an important role in film.
I've heard of this before.
Yes.
Aren't they like tied to like the mob or something like that? Or am I mistaken?
Yes, there's a very long. It shows up in Hollywood itself. Like it shows up in films, the Teamster Union, which is very funny because Teamsters are showing up to work these jobs about the Teamster Union. But but it's wild. It's crazy to me that, I mean, that makes complete sense. It just I don't know. It just blew my mind. I was like, wow, that makes a lot of sense. But
Yeah. So
that's funny.
apparently this is inspired by the fact that the Casting Directors Association, they teamed up with the Teamsters in 2006 and were able to be recognized and unionized.
Wow, that's crazy.
So
That would be the way you do it, though.
Yes. So the Association of Media Composers and Lyricists decided to follow the same path. And their effort kind of apparently failed in 2011 when the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, the general alliance of big studios in America at least, they rejected this because they said that we're not going to deal with you no matter what, even if you became a union, because of the 1984 National Labor Relations Board ruling. We don't think that you are composers that you can unionize. So even if they allowed you to, and we don't think legally that the courts will allow you to, we don't think you're eligible to be a union, so we won't deal with you. So that's it. So that's really the last effort. So to create a new composers union.
Could they not? I mean, now that they've organized under, or they attempted to organize under the Teamsters, could they not have just said, okay, well, if that's it, if that's the way it's going to be, let's just strike. Now that they've collectivized their, their action.
Well, so I guess the problem probably at the time was that even though some big people in the industry were pushing for this, it'd be very hard since it wasn't an actual union and didn't offer actual tangible benefits to anybody yet. It'd be very hard to convince everybody to just stop working.
It's game theory. It's always the problem with collective action. It's always the reason why a similarly powered unitary force has a much easier time dominating a similarly powered multipolar force, right? Like, it's always this problem of, like, if everyone just did the thing, there'd be no risk to anybody. But for some reason, we can't get that logic through our thick human skulls.
Yeah. So that brings us to the next part of this, which is what is happening now, and what is what are people thinking of industry, and honestly, so from what I understand right now, interest amongst composers in having a union is at an all-time high, or at least maybe not all-time, but at least since this effort in 2009 to 2011, highest it's been since then. It seems like on social media that's all any composer wants to talk about. But there's quite a amount for all the people who are excited about it, trying to push this into reality. There's a lot of opposition in the industry as well, and some of that is that people think that it's doomed to fail in the courts because it has already failed. The precedent of the National Labor Relations Board, it's going to fail legally to become a union. And also, even if it became a union, the studios won't deal with them. There's also a lot of opposition, I understand, because people really do not like the American Federation of Musicians, particular in Hollywood, where it's apparently a really poorly run organization and is responsible for the decline. A lot of people feel it's responsible for the decline in the industry in Los Angeles, at least with live musicians. And that's a whole different question of the issue of musicians unions in musician union in Los Angeles, and what has happened there. But a lot of people have seen that because of their seemingly quite ineffective bargaining, right? Oh yeah, we got the musicians' names in the credits, the end of the credits, but we failed to do anything meaningful other than that. Like, other than basically we're giving a pat on the back to our musicians, but not helping them financially. We did talk about this at some point, probably like a year and a half ago. So probably more information you can find on our podcast backlog catalog somewhere on the musicians union. But essentially, a lot of the live recording work has left Los Angeles. Very complicated. Again, why and all, how the American Federation of Musicians Local 47 is bargained. But really now we went from, as they say, people will say there are 5 major recording studios that were booked, 3-hour sessions all day, every day, 24/7, 365. Now there are only two studios that are recording studios that are active, and usually they're not double booked, and not every day of the week. And most of that work has gone overseas to Eastern Europe in particular, where it's much cheaper. So a lot of composers who live in Los Angeles, in particular, especially those who live in Los Angeles, look at that and say, wow, unions be bad, right? They kind of ruined the industry as it was in Los Angeles, so it would just be a bad idea for us. It'll just make things even worse for composers. So there is quite a bit of resistance amongst some people. Now, the big questions, there are big issues that are composers want to address with this hypothetical union. It seems to be a couple of things. So one is work standards, which basically, how much you can work, or like if you're going to work a certain number of hours, be demanded to work a certain number of hours. What is the rate for overtime? That sort of thing. Now, some people, again, don't like that. They think that, this is just going to limit my creativity, right? So there's some friction there. There's also a desire, this has been building for a number of years, for workplace safety. And it doesn't mean like, being, how to safely like operate a computer so it doesn't fall on you. I mean, I guess that's there, but it's not so many inherent physical risks in composing. But there's pretty much no oversight of a composer and their team, which has led to a lot of kind of predatory practices amongst interns or low-level staffers, issues of kind of assault and abuse of various kinds, and that sort of thing, exploitation, have been kind of rampant in the industry for a while. And a lot of people feel like if we had a union, that would be the best way to standardize a safe workplace. Again, that's another really broad topic that go on about for a long time. The third really big issue is streaming and streaming royalties. Again, something we've talked about quite a bit. But composers, understandably, feel that the current, status quo, since they don't have any bargaining power, right? The current general status quo leaves them open to exploitation by studios in the realm of streaming, because studios are just following what they've done in the past, 75 years or longer, 80 years, I guess, which didn't factor in streaming at all. And the last really big issue, of course, is AI, and I know that's kind of the big issue for the writers and for the actors who are on strike right now. How will the industry use AI in music? And again, we've talked about that as well.
Two AI roundtables.
Yes. But it seems like it's quite a legitimate fear of a lot of composers that their work is going to be replaced by AI to some degree, and they have no protection against that because they have no bargaining power, right? No collective agreements with studios. Now, one complicating factor is that back when the composers did have a union, up until 1982, media composition is basically film and TV. Now we have video games and virtual reality and other, smaller things, but video games is the big thing that has come about since then. And one of the obstacles, in addition to the legal obstacles and the getting the studios to agree with you obstacle, seems to be that the general way that studio structure is, and publication and hiring of composers works in the video game world is very different than it is in the film and TV world. Therefore, it would be very hard to come up with an agreement that would be promote equality between people who do film versus video games that all these different sides would agree to. So that seems to be an obstacle. So perhaps if a union were to come about, there'd have to be a separate video game composers and film screen composers union, I guess. So that might be one avenue if these things could come into existence. That might have to be the way that that things would have to go. So a couple of other things that seem to be barriers is that right now, as I noted, in 1953, I think, or 1955, when about 100% of working composers by whatever the definition was in Los Angeles and New York ratified the first agreement and formed the union. There's 360 composers. There are far more than 360 people working as composers to some degree in America right now. And we've talked a lot about this as well, right? Ease of access due to technology, really low barrier. So in some sense, it seems like there would have to be some kind of barrier to entry, right? You can't just let every person who owns a laptop join the union.
Yeah, that's how it works for all the other guilds. There's a whole set of, entry gatekeeping stuff, yeah.
Right. Or I think the Writers Guild, you have to make $47,000 a year as a writer in Hollywood, right? But part of the counter to that is that if you don't include everyone, there'll never be an effective. You can never have an effective strike, right? Because you can always find some young kid who's willing to work for essentially for free, who thinks that if I just this is my shot to be the next Hans Zimmer or John Williams. So some people are quite worried that if we don't allow everybody, then there'll never be any bargaining power. There'll never really be a threat of a strike because there's so many people trying to be film composers that they're desperate enough that they will, break the picket line, right? Act as scabs and continue working, creating musical content for these for the studios. So it seems like there are some kind of barriers and things that the composers need to decide amongst themselves before any attempt in the future to form a union could occur, or unions, as I said, composers, film, screen composers versus video game composers. And again, even if composers did come up with a plan, whether that could actually come into existence is quite questionable, right? Whether any of the studios will deal with them, whether the National Labor Relations Board today will ignore the seemingly silly precedent that they themselves set, I guess, exactly 40 years ago. Right? These are major obstacles to forming a composers union. Personally, though, it seems to me that it would really be quite beneficial to most people to have a composers union. In addition to just granting safeguards against, exploitative practices in streaming and with AI, or promoting, a safer workplace. I think those are all really important things. Also, it I think is important as well that to have like standardized union healthcare, because especially for a lot of younger composers, that's something that can be quite expensive to get good healthcare. And also, if you're an independent contractor, as these composers are generally, it's just how they have to function, right? You're paying twice for Social Security, healthcare, right? You're paying twice in taxes for that as an independent contractor. So, I think if a composers union could come into existence, I think it would be a really fantastic thing. And whether it's possible or not, generally, it seems quite unlikely to most people. But there is quite a lot of momentum behind the exploring the idea again. So hopefully, the community does continue exploring that and can launch some effort in the future that can somehow be successful.
Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, my like the idea of like labor unions is so complicated. But like I'm like, I think I've said this before. I'm just generally I'm always for the little guys banding together to get their fair share from the big guys. I always find professional labor unions to be a little bit more complicated because it gets a little bit weird depending on how things shake out, like historically. Because it happened with the Teamsters Union. It happens with SAG-AFTRA actually specifically, or SAG and AFTRA before they were SAG-AFTRA when they were separate. And like what can sometimes happen with the sort of professional unions is this doesn't address anything you're saying, it's just a general thought, is that they can sort of like they can prefer the people who are already in the union more than the people who are coming up, to the point where it becomes like a hard barrier, if you get what I mean. Mm-hmm. And like, for example, like the cinematographers union, I need like something like some absurd amount of set hours, I can't remember, in order to be considered. And then there's a whole bunch of subjective things. And then there's also, I have to be invited by someone who's already in the union, which, any one of those things on their own wouldn't be so bad, but all of it combined is like, that's really a burden to get in. And then you have this idea of like union sets, which, especially for a SAG-AFTRA, really harms the ability of new actors to come in and make a name for themselves. So it's kind of like it depends on how well you design the union and how well you sort of execute the idea, because you can end up hurting the long term of the industry.
Yeah, I know there's also like, for the American Federation of Musicians, you could work as, I think I call it FICOR, right, where you like pay union dues, but you're not like fully a union member, so you can work on union things, but you can also work on non-union things. Perhaps something like that would be an option for composers as well. Yeah. Creating fewer barriers, perhaps.
Yeah. If the film industry worked more like other industries and things weren't so heavy on independent contractors, because it's not just composers, there's just so many independent contractors in filmmaking in general. Like, you could just easily have production company based unions, and I think that would solve like 99% of the problems. Like, you would just have a union for Lionsgate, a union for Disney, and then that would just be the counterparty to your employer. But because it's so complicated, because you have independent contractors always moving around, they're working with Lionsgate this year, and then they're working with so-and-so next year, it becomes a lot more
Right.
complex.
And that probably did make it easier back in like the first union in 1945 and the second one in 1955, when these studios each had their own orchestra, and a lot of times composers worked with the same production company. So that
Yeah.
probably did make it easier to get started back in the 40s and 50s.
Yeah. Fascinating. Yeah, I like that. I didn't know any of that background at all. So that was good.
Yeah, so that's all I have on why composers can't unionize, and why there's quite a bit of interest today in getting a union going again.
Cool. Yeah. Nathan, we didn't discuss beforehand who's going first. Do you have a preference on the next one?
Oh,
Because I can easily go if you want.
either way, I'm okay either way.
Let's see. I'll bang out mine, and then I don't think it'll be particularly long. So I'll bang out mine, and then you can go at the end.
Okay.
Sweet. All right. So that was mixed media music, and we're going to transition over to mixed media movies. So you're on the other end of the transitions. Here we go.
Mixed media movies.
And welcome back to Mixed Media. If you've been watching live this whole time, hello again. This is our next segment of Mixed Media, and I'll be talking about movies this whole time. And if you are listening to this in post, the last segment was about why composers don't have their own union, the historical reasons, and the reasons why they're trying to create one, and the complications, all that kind of stuff. Super interesting stuff that Ben discussed in the last segment. Totally suggest that you check that out. So there you go. And I'm going to be talking about, I should switch this. Oh, there we go. Sound of Freedom, which is a recent film that I saw in the theaters. And I'll be giving my opinions, breaking it down, taking a filmmaker's perspective. There's a lot of social, political commentary out there about this film. But I'm going to be taking I'll talk about those stuff somewhat, but I'm going to be taking mostly a filmmaker's perspective when breaking it down. So look forward to that. But before we do that, we should reintroduce ourselves for those who are just tuning in or those who are listening in post. So my name is Irving Nestor. I'm a filmmaker and media entrepreneur based out of Mount Carmel, Pennsylvania, and I own a company called Ariella.
Hi, I'm Ben Costello. I'm a flute player and media composer, and currently I'm in Maryland.
Yeah.
And I'm Nathan Nestor. I'm a 3D modeler and video game developer.
Sweet. Awesome. Now, we're going to be talking about Sound of Freedom, like I said. But the reason I went to see this film, besides having some time and also looking at the list of things in the theater and being depressed again that 80% of it is Disney. Indiana Jones. There was some kids thing. I can't remember what it is. Like basically everything is Disney in the theater, minus a few things. And I think one of the only other ones that was not Disney was Insidious, and I have not seen any of the Insidious films, so I wasn't going to watch that because if it's not Disney, it's going to be serial. It's going to be something that's part of some franchise, some copy, some remake, some something.
Mission Impossible isn't Disney, right?
No, I don't. Oh, actually, was it a Fox? Let me see. Mission Impossible Studio. I don't think so. Let's see here. It'll take me a moment to get this, apparently. Production company is Cruise Wagner Productions. Oh, Skydance. Oh, Bad Robot. Oh, so it's J.J. Abrams' company, actually. That's funny. I didn't know that. That's really random. And I believe it'll be...
Do you know if it was acquired by them or if they originally started?
So they're the production company. The distributor is Paramount. So it's a Paramount franchise, which I should have known because Paramount used to own a bunch of theme parks. That's a story for another day. And they had, I think, some Mission Impossible themed stuff back in the day, from Mission Impossible 1 or something. But yeah, I looked at the list of stuff and I was like, yeah, I'm so bored with all of this. And Sound of Freedom just will not leave my feed. Everyone and their mother is making a review of Sound of Freedom, whether they're a film person or not. And the hype behind the film, the sort of seemingly organic discussion around the film made me interested. So, yeah, some interesting characters involved in the making of this film and the distribution of this film. So, and it has an interesting story, an anti-Disney story as a film. And we all know I hate Disney. So all of that combined, I went to see this film in the theater. I want to definitely talk about my experience at that theater as well, and I'll be talking about that at the end, so if you just don't care about like me ranting about cinema in general and the way theaters run and operate and all that kind of stuff, I'll leave that to the end. And if you want to hear some of that stuff, that'll be at the end as well. Okay, so first, what is this film about? Well, this film was pitched for a July 4th premiere. It has a great name for that, Sound of Freedom, right? But the freedom that we're talking about in this film is not particularly American. In fact, I will talk about this a little bit later, but thematically, it's decidedly not that. Like, it's specifically not that. Thematically. It's a story of the freedom or the freedom we're discussing in this film is the freedom pertaining to children being sex trafficked. Which, by the way, if you're uncomfortable with this topic, the whole movie's about this. So we're going to be talking about that in terms of what the movie's about and what happens and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, tune off if you don't want to hear it, because it is dark stuff. It's very dark stuff. So basically, what we learn in the opening of the film is that this is based on a true story. Now, the filmmakers decided to just put the text based on a true story at the beginning of the film, and that could mean so many things that I take anything that says that at the beginning of the film without any further context with a very, very light pinch of salt. You know, like I don't necessarily, based on a true story can mean 1,000 different things, but we'll get back to that towards the end when we talk about how the film ends. And then we kind of just jump into this really depressing sequence of of real life footage of children getting abducted, which was rough.
That sounds like a fun way to start your film viewing experience.
Yes, CCTV footage mostly of like children being snatched out. Now, me personally, I've become, I should say, a rather paranoid person. Probably attribute that mostly to getting married. So, you know, like I know of these things already. I've seen footage like this already. So to me, it's not particularly shocking, you know, to see children being snatched in parking lots. But it's.
I don't think I'd want to watch that.
Yeah, it's nothing particularly violent, and I think, and we'll discuss also that part of things as well as we move forward. But like just the idea that you're looking at real footage of children in parking lots being snatched by strangers and being hauled off to God knows where, it's depressing. Yeah, I don't know if I have anything more to say about that. It's as sad as you expect. And the film sort of opens up that way, I think, so that you can get a sort of idea that this film is trying to be rather serious about a particular topic. Like we're not incidentally talking about child trafficking, right? That's the idea there. We're not just talking about it because it makes a good story. We're talking about it because it's real and because we want to expose some of the story to the public, or expose some of this topic to an audience, right? So immediately you're getting sort of like almost activist vibes, like from the front of the film, basically, about child trafficking. Okay. Then we meet our main character, and this film is very focused around one character, which is played by wow, I'm going to mess up his name. Jim Caviezel. Is that right? Am I getting that right? I think so. Okay. Caviezel, who played Jesus in The Passion of the Christ. That's his most famous role. And his next most famous thing, which is also a famous role of his is being the lead in Person of Interest, which is a very long-running show, and was written by Jonathan Nolan, if you didn't know that. So it's a Nolan brother project. And he's, as far as I knew, and we're going to get into when we talk about sort of the implications of this film, a rather respected person in Hollywood. We're going to get back to that topic as we go forward. But it's very interesting. I have not read I haven't read pretty much anybody's commentary on this film. So pretty much, and I think this might be separate from a lot of the other reviews that you might find on this film that are kind of reviewing it in some sort of context. I don't have that context. I just went and watched it. So this is a much more raw take, I think, than you'll find elsewhere. Okay. Now, the genre... So we meet Jim Caviezel's character, which is based off of a guy named Tim Ballard, who is a Homeland Security agent, working for the Department of Homeland Security, particularly working with children trafficked from South America, right? So trafficked into the United States from South America. He's catching the end of that supply chain, right? So he's originally focusing on catching the P files for hopefully YouTube doesn't dislike the words I use during this stream too much, but the P files, if you get what I'm saying, he's catching them and he's setting them up, and we see a few operations that he does at the beginning of the film to set up that this is his normal job, this is what he does. So he catches P files. I think we understand what that means. And being at the end of the supply chain, we get this sort of the first bit of thematic tension of the whole thing, which is that being at the end of the supply chain doesn't actually solve the fundamental problem, right? So, just catching P files might be somewhat satisfying, but, catching P files doesn't free children. Right, that doesn't actually stop children from being abducted. It doesn't stop the supply chain from the front, right? So that's the sort of central premise of the film. That's where this sort of tension starts, and that's where what the tension will be riding thematically throughout the whole thing, which is what does it take to solve this problem, or maybe not solve is not the right word, to address this problem, right? What does it truly take? That's sort of the question that we're asking throughout the entire film. Now, before I continue on, the film's genre... we're going to say something, Ben? Oh, okay. The film's genre is definitely melodrama. It is a very straightforward storytelling of something that we are going to tell beat by beat. So it's we're not going to do the whole, this is a very pointed, strong act with a clear and concise climax, and the point of this act was to address the theme in this way and then move on. No, we're going to go da 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 da. Doesn't mean there's still acts in it, of course, if you were to actually analyze it. But the way it feels is it's sort of you're loping along as if someone... if you don't know what that sort of term means, loping along, it's kind of when your friend is telling you a story, and they're just kind of going da 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 da. They're not creating an act structure in their head beforehand. They're just kind of, addressing each event as it comes, creating the acts naturally, but not in a way that's sort of hyper crafted, if that makes sense. But the story is very melodramatic, meaning... and maybe I should have looked up a good definition of melodrama beforehand. But a drama, a simple drama, is one that relies on sort of serious tension, I would say. Serious tension of some sort, as opposed to its other broad category of comedy, which relies on comedic tension, right? So those would be the two sort of opposing things. In drama, we've got like a jillion billion subcategories, and one of them I would say that we could sort of put a class of films in is melodrama. Melodrama, you can think of the most extreme examples being soap operas, like on TV, right? Like that would be the most extreme form of it. But I think the word gets a bit of a bad rap, maybe for good reasons in certain circumstances, because when we think of it, we think of cheesiness, campiness, to the point of bad, right? Like, we think of those things. Melodrama doesn't have to be that, and a lot of old Hollywood is very melodramatic. Like, it's something that we've kind of shedded more recently in filmmaking, and maybe that to our detriment when we think of melodrama in terms of like those I guess sort of like similar films where we have one singular hero who is going to go do blah 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 blah, and everything is very serious and very there's no comedic tension. There's no reminding you that you're in a film. It's just like we're just really going for all of the tension all of the time. We're really going for all the performances being larger than life rather than grounding them particularly in any particular way. Jim Caviezel definitely fits that sort of role. He reminded me a lot of what I've seen of him as Person of Interest when he was delivering dialogue. In particular, I will say his close-ups really remind you why a lot of people really latch onto him, because he can really draw up these complex emotions in his face and the crying. It can be a lot, like with the close-ups, very melodramatic. But with his like delivery of dialogue is very much so like a hero, right? Like, so very much so not a real person that you would find like talk to the guy and he delivers you some sort of like well-crafted response that sounds like something from I don't know, the top 100 men on earth, like quotes or something like that, like kind of thing. That's what we're getting with the melodrama through sort of the dialogue and stuff like this. So that's the genre we're working with. Totally fine to work with this genre. But I will say, and let me just finish sort of giving you a canvas of the whole film before I get to the story structure. I will say there are some places where it falls into some of those melodramatic pitfalls, and we'll come back to that and come back to that later. So in order for us to sort of explore this idea, and I'm talking about it as if it's not a real story, and I'll get back to that as well, but as a storyteller, I'm going to decompose it like it's not a real story, of course. So the way that we're going to try to explore this idea, this tension of like we're not getting at the source of the issue, is through a sort of inciting incident, right, writing term, an inciting incident of him coming across a small boy or chasing down the chain enough, his boss allows him to sort of do something a little bit extra this one time, right? Which allows him to sort of like go up the chain like one rung, basically, and find the distributor of this one child, and then actually find that child, which he never does, right? So he never is actually interacting with the children. He's only actually interacting normally with the P-files. So this one child becomes the inciting incident because, of course, emotionally, right, we're going to use, sounds like a bad term in this particular context, but like we're going to use like structurally, like from a storytelling perspective, we're going to use that child, the emotional sort of punch behind meeting that child, and at the beginning of the film we actually got the backstory of that child up ahead, so we know this child already. We're going to use that child to unlock a whole adventure behind actually freeing children, which is what the main character basically becomes obsessed with. The idea that he's freed this one child, right, is going to be the emotional force behind why he'll do everything else, right? So freeing this one child, finding this one child, knowing this one child has a sister becomes a very important point in this whole thing, because the child asks him to find his sister. which is, again, in the melodrama, it's very dark. The whole thing is very dark. To find his sister and all that kind of stuff, and that drives his action. The two sort of resisting forces that he's going to find are both external. So we have very much so a type of Superman type character to our main character. He's going to be sort of like our virtuous hero. We're not going to be exploring his internal world, really. We're exploring the world through his virtue. Does that make sense? What was I saying? Oh yeah, so the two forces that he's going to sort of butt up against as this virtuous man is he's going to butt up against the bureaucracy, right? So like there's this like notion of like what does the established mechanisms, how do they actually address anything, or are they just kind of just for show, right? So like this would be like the Department of Homeland Security itself, right? And on the other end, we'll have the actual perpetrators themselves. So the actual traffickers, the evil people, we'll have those sorts of things stopping him from continuing this mission of finding this boy's sister and freeing more children, which has become his like obsession, basically. Okay. The story then lopes along, and he does a whole bunch of stuff to achieve this. First, sanctioned as a U.S. Homeland Security agent, using a special budget to do so, and some bureaucratic finagling from his boss, who approved of his actions and motives and understands what he's trying to accomplish. And then, after his budget is exhausted, because it really only pays for a 1-week trip to Colombia, the children are, if you care, the children are from Honduras. They've been trafficked to Colombia. And he takes this trip to Colombia to sort of investigate the supply chain even further up the rungs than he was before, to figure out how everything operates. When he gets there, he's going to meet a whole bunch of characters that are very well portrayed by their respective actors. Very phenomenal work in the melodramatic form, definitely, but in that genre, good work from pretty much everyone involved. And he's going to realize that this problem is going to take much more than a week in Colombia. Right. You can't solve child trafficking by spending a week in Colombia and talking to some people. It's going to take basically an operation that the bureaucracy cannot give him, because there is no such funding allocated for such operations. There's no sanctioned operation to do this. It's not something that the bureaucracy has provided for, and we kind of get this idea that now we're unchaining the story from being about, or it never really was about this, but we're really making explicit that this story is not about the United States. And that's something I really, really thought was super refreshing, in the sense that something that involves the Homeland Security, the Office of Homeland Security, could very well be a sort of proxy for, I guess, like, just like bland pro-American sentiment of like, well, look what great stuff we do, like, hurrah, like we provide freedom to everybody. But we're deliberately at this point in the film unchaining ourselves from the United States, and that'll be very thematically smart, as we'll talk about later. But what this does is it creates a sort of loose cannon of Jim Caviezel's character. He's now unmoored from the chains of bureaucracy, and now all he has are his trafficking foes to butt up against, and he's using a few tools to do that, including the Colombian police, which take a very prominent role in the story, which I also thought was very fascinating of a choice. Again, we're kind of breaking it down like a story, but a fascinating of a choice to go with, and we'll again talk about that later when we talk about themes. The story ends, I'm not going to spoil the ending, but the story ends, at least generally speaking, with him being able to set up an operation to attempt to save 50 children, including hopefully the one girl he was looking for, which is the sister of the boy. He thinks that he has enough intelligence, enough information to make the assumption that she would be brought along in this cadre of 50 children, which requires him to pretend to be a P-file himself. So he has to pretend to be a P-file and sort of create this sort of intelligence-style operation without the backing of an intelligence agency, right? So he's kind of doing this all himself. By putting a few interesting characters together, a former cartel member, and a billionaire, or I don't know, it's implied, a very rich person who formerly worked with the United States on other operations, so he knows him through work, but is sort of begs him and convinces him to work outside of the confines of the bureaucracy in order to effectuate this operation. Okay. How that goes, you'll have to go watch the film. There's like probably another 30 minutes after that, because there's like an act after the like what you might think might be the end, and we'll come back to that. But you'll have to go see the film if you want to know what happens after that. Okay, now the pitfalls of melodrama, because I think this film is generally well crafted, and this is just one of the annoying things. Not annoying. I think this is a problem, actually. And it'll be a problem probably, excuse me, with the staying power of the film. Because in our current context, we haven't seen probably a film like this about child trafficking or basically international human rights issues probably in a long time. I can't think of a film that's come out recently that's taken this topic or something like it up. So it's fresh in a sense. Obviously, there are many films in the past about this, but it's fresh in our current context, right? But that won't always be the case, right? Like, sometime in the future, someone might pop this in outside of our context, and they might want to enjoy it in of itself without the sort of like social implications of the film particularly, right? In that sense, some of the melodrama falls into the traps of melodrama, which is when all the drama is hitting on 11, when every line is hitting on 11. It's not Marvel bad, where like we get one-liners every 2 seconds. It's not like that bad. There are not that many one-liners. There are a few key moments with one-liners, but the general dark, oppressive tone that the film tends to take is lacking contrast, right? So like the problem when you take this sort of heavy tone throughout a whole film is that you'll end up in a space where it's hard to punctuate something further than the dial up to 11. Does that make sense? Like, it's hard to go to 12, and 12 doesn't even seem that high compared to 11. That's the problem of, and that's the trap of melodrama, right? There's some great moments that were written into the film that in the edit don't feel great, as great anymore, simply because we are missing that contrast. For example, there's this great moment, sorry for the spoiler, this is kind of a minor spoiler. Oh, we have a chat on Rumble, by the way. Sailor4165 says, there's nothing funny about the subject, and yes, it pertains to the USA open borders that encourages this kind of criminal activity. Yeah, that's the social implications that we'll talk about at the end. And there's nothing funny about the subject, obviously. I hope you didn't think that I thought it was funny. But the that sort of tone that the film sort of takes is very heavy-handed throughout the entire time. So we are not able to create that contrast between drama and melodrama, maybe within the same film. So there's a few moments. One of the moments, and this is a minor spoiler, is that we have this good moment of filmmaking and storytelling where the camera is going to take the position of someone Jim Caviezel is talking to, who it doesn't really matter for the purposes of this, and he's going to say the line to that person, which means to the camera, which means to the audience sitting in the theater, right? Symbolically, right? He's going to say, what if it was your daughter? Right? Okay, good moment of filmmaking. We've put the audience in at the receiving end of that statement, right? The problem is nobody who's probably seen this film remembers that moment. Me, with my filmmaker's eyes and ears and thoughts, I know that that moment was supposed to be a very important moment where we haven't done this at all in the film, where we put the audience on the receiving end of these kinds of questions. We picked this point that was at one of the central climaxes of the film, right? We put that point there because we wanted to punch the audience with that idea. And that's not a bad idea. Well executed. Jim Caviezel delivered the line amazing, but the film is dialed up so high the entire time that it's like, okay, now we've gone to 12, but that's hardly contrasting against the 11, right? And
it's a very musical problem sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's the pitfall of melodrama that we can sort of learn from this film if you're trying to learn filmmaking stuff. It's somewhat of a nitpick because most of the time it doesn't feel cheesy. It actually fits in the melodrama mold without being too just like cardboardy, tinny, like fake, right? It actually is treating the topic with super serious, which feels proper in this particular case, right? It feels proper to take the whole idea that this story is about and really dial up everything so that we feel it all through this super serious lens because it's a super serious topic, as Sailor 4165 said, right? So, okay, there we go. Now, cinematography was fascinating to watch because a lot of it reminded me oddly of Spielberg, if Spielberg shot mostly low-light scenes. Very, very interesting. I was very curious because I haven't looked at the budget of this film yet still, but it didn't feel low budget at all in the camera moves. Like, there are some shots I were convinced could only be done with a boom. If you've seen a film boom, those things are gigantic, which means they're expensive and unwieldy. These giant crane shots, it's crazy. They got helicopter shots in there, like, clearly not a drone, like, proper helicopter shots in there. So, kind of like, how did they do that with such a small budget? They clearly traveled to Colombia, which is always, going to be expensive to go international. You've got a whole bunch of other concerns when you go international as well. And so, yeah, like, the whole thing is very competently shot. Very, well done. We're definitely in the cinematography, the lighting, and the color. We're definitely also embracing melodrama as well, which really adds to that sort of overall oppressive sort of vibe throughout the whole thing. Okay, then there's the music, which I'll give my non-educated opinion on. But the music was very varied. So, like, sometimes we get something that's more like an underscore. Maybe that's like the right term. That, like, sort of feels like just like a soft sheet underlaying everything. As opposed to sometimes where we're getting ethnic music from, I assume, from Colombia for the most part of the movie, and maybe some from Honduras towards the beginning of the film.
Is it diegetic music, or is it
sometimes and sometimes not? Yeah, so
okay.
Depends.
Interesting.
So the underscore is kind of like what you expect. It's kind of just, some string ambience, some like, like some stuff there to punctuate the moments, and it's not actually that interesting. But the inclusion of the music from the particular cultures that we're discussing was usually very well placed, very well edited, and very fitting tonally to the piece, which worked very well. There's some very beautiful guitar doodling, which I assume that's actually composed for like, you know, to the film. I don't think that's something they pulled from different places and edited together or something like this. And the guitar doodling is very effective and very good. And this film had a theme song. Like, I was not expecting that. A theme song that's not like a... Oh, my camera battery died.
I was about to say, yeah.
A theme song that's not a pop song or something like cringy like that. A theme song that's like, you know, made for the film and just in of itself a theme song. And I was going to say it was memorable because I remembered it after leaving the film, but now I don't remember it, so it wasn't that memorable. I don't know. So there's that. That's interesting. Finally, to address, just going down the filmmaking sort of points here, to address the sort of realness of this story. Hold on, sorry. To address the realness of this story, the film ends with a bunch of real footage of the operation that this guy conducted trying to sting the cartel, it's sort of like cartel adjacent organization, and other people involved in the human trafficking. And they didn't show this footage at the beginning. They just drop it at the end. And I will say that is probably one of the smartest things that they did. Because what they did for the entire film is withhold... There's somewhat of a tension, at least to me. Maybe not most moviegoers felt this tension. But to me, the based on a true story can mean so many things. And to tell the story throughout, to loop along, and to just hit these sort of event notes, you don't know how much of it is, like, you know, accurate. How much of it is just contrived to tell a good story, which is not necessarily bad, but when you leave it ambiguous, you leave it ambiguous, right? At the end, we strip away all the ambiguity, and we show real footage of the raid that happened on an island that was purchased just for this raid by the billionaire character in the film. But I learned at the end that was a real person. And this island was bought for this sting, and the Colombian police stormed the island like literally like an army of police, maybe like 100 police officers stormed this island, taking down everyone who was there and liberating 50 kids. And you see the kids in the footage, and that is extremely emotional. It's extremely emotional. So saving that for the end, I think, was very intelligent, and not withholding it also was very intelligent. You know, you could have said, well, we said it's based off a true story. We'll leave telling of the true story to the marketing, to the real Tim Ballard or whatever. And I think the shock to me of seeing like the island almost exactly as it was pictured in the film, to seeing the setup of the operation almost exactly as it was in the film with the tiki bars, like literally almost like exactly the same, was a moment that took this film from like just kind of like, I guess, average good, or maybe like something that I'm, outside of the context of this film kicking Disney's butt and like what it means socially and all this kind of stuff, probably would have been somewhat forgettable down the line. Not that child trafficking itself would be forgettable, but like the film itself, its particulars might be forgettable. Took it to something like, oh wow, I'm not going to forget this anymore. Like I'm not going to forget this, because turns out this Tim Ballard crazy person actually did this. Outside the confines of the bureaucracy. And that's crazy. That's crazy. That's utterly nuts, and very and kind of steps the film outside of just being a melodrama about this particular event, and makes it very from surreal to real. Kind of pegs it down to reality, which I think was a very intelligent choice. And that being said, my overall thoughts on the film. I'm not sure exactly. I haven't given a formal score on Letterboxd yet, because I keep teetering between two things, which is a 3 and a 3.5. which, if you're not familiar with my grading, is not bad. 2.5 is average, so 3 already puts it above average. 3.5 is what I would call an average good movie, and I'm leaning towards putting it, in the 3.5 category, I think. And yeah, so good film. It's not going to be mind blowing if you go see it. It's just the story. It's just a story. That's it. Like, all they're endeavoring to do is tell you the story. It's not trying to be a super filmic, like crazy, like Scorsese. Like, it's not trying to be any of that. It's just trying to tell you one story. That's really it. And that story becomes very pointed simply because of the reality of it at the end, which makes it particularly interesting and distinguishable, I think. So that's my thoughts on the film. Now, before I end my segment, I do want to talk about a few extra stuff. So yeah, Sailor 4165 was talking about some of the politics involved, and this film was made 5 years ago. I thought it was made in 2019, or I should say, production. I believe ended 5 years ago or something like this. So a long while back. And I think in our time right now, we can easily associate the film with like our current day politic. Where the film actually, I think, is a little bit more honest than that. Not that politics isn't honest per se, we shouldn't talk about these things in a political spirit. That's fine. I'm just saying the film itself isn't really doing anything specifically to address any specific politic, though a lot of things in the film will kind of bring up those thoughts simply because they parallel certain real life things. That's really, that's what's going on. And so in that sense, a very timely release, I should say, from a getting butts in seat perspective, right? Like if this is the film that you're going to make and you've already made and you want to ride the social times, right? Like this would be the time to release it, and maybe the whole rigmarole that went with COVID and through other stuff was a blessing in disguise for the film, because I can't imagine it would have done the numbers it would have done 5 years ago or 6 or 4 years ago, whenever it would have released before. So yeah, fortunate for them, I suppose. And yeah, it directly, we get a scene from Congress at the end, a real life scene of Tim Ballard speaking to Congress, basically asking for us to focus more on, if we're going to put resources to international issues, that it's a tragedy that we don't put those resources towards child trafficking, which affects the most vulnerable people. Very good argument he makes at the end, by the way, Tim Ballard to Congress. And my understanding, or at least what the film informs me, is that he was basically ignored, and that there was no program created. There was no diversion of funds from other projects to this project. That child trafficking actually has increased exponentially in the past few years. Again, film's numbers, it says that something like, I think it says that by 2024, child trafficking will be a more valued industry than drugs. Meaning, there will be more money circulating for child trafficking than for getting illegal drugs, which is very depressing. So, yeah, that's the sort of oomph that we're given at the end. Okay. Then we get a post-credit message. Now, the reason everyone stays for this post-credit message is not because they know it's there. It's because they put a countdown to it, which I thought was actually pretty neat. It was like 3 minutes to post-credit message. I was like, oh, I've never seen that before. That's fascinating. And we forces you to sit through the credits, which any filmmaker would love. Anyone involved in the filmmaking process knows that having your name burned into the film is a high source of pride. So, you're kind of forced to sit through it. And at the end, we get a message from Jim Caviezel. And I wouldn't say as Jim Caviezel himself. He's kind of half playing the character and half being himself, if that makes sense. I guess to try to connect the film with what he's saying. And he makes at first I was worried that it was just going to be sort of like an activist speech about like child trafficking when we just got 2 hours of it already and we didn't need any more. You know, we don't need more telling us child trafficking is bad. But I was shocked that half the pitch is about child trafficking, but it actually was done in a very good way, I would say, like in the sense that it reminded us that it's not good enough just to like know these things are happening. You have to like do something about it, and it didn't really tell us what exactly we should do about it, but gave some directional ideas basically, and those are all fine. But like not even half of it, 2/3 of this post-credit message was a pitch for cinema. Fascinating. Like I was literally shocked when I was sitting there. I was like, this is Jim Caviezel made one of the best pitches for the movie theater I've ever heard in my whole life. through the message of this film, by basically saying that because and this takes, you know, cojones to sort of do, because you have to rely on the idea that the audience actually vibed with your film to pull this off. But he's basically saying, you thought this was powerful. Wait until you see all of cinema. That's basically the argument that he was making. He was saying, you thought you thought that we could pull your heartstrings and discuss this topic with you for 2 hours in the movie theater. Imagine if we had these communal experiences all the time for anything. And it was one of the best pitches. He kept repeating this great mantra that will stick in people's heads. It's great to repeat things in pitches. Hot tip. Storytellers are the most powerful people in the world. Now, that's not literally true, I don't think, but but it will stick, right? Because we will start to think of all the stories that affect our lives and influence us. And we'll now view cinema in that sort of grand narrative of storytelling. And I thought that was really genius. He succinctly put together why a cinematic experience in the theater specifically is important, better than anyone else I've ever heard who's lamented the dying of theaters. And guess what? He got applause at the end of his pitch. Applause from the audience at the end of his pitch. There was no applause at the end of the film. Applause at his pitch. Amazing. Amazing stuff. I was really floored by it, to be honest. And I really appreciate that so much, that was there at the end there. It really reminded people, I think, what art really should be, you know. And I really enjoyed that. Okay, final things. To talk about my film going experience going there. So this AMC is in a town called Bloomsburg. It's kind of a college town, and the AMC is kind of when you drive into it, it's kind of slightly run down in the sense that it hasn't had a new coat of paint or cleaned like the outside in like a while. And I'm seeing this all too often now, and it's very sad to see because it's a physical representation of the cinema dying. You know, that's what it looks like. But when you walk into the lobby of this place, it is so bland. It is so just we colored the walls different colors to make it fun, and we've deleted the tellers at the front of the theater in favor of doing the tickets at the concession stand, which I'm not necessarily, doesn't bother me necessarily in of itself, but they didn't change the layout of the theater in response to that choice, which makes it feel like everything in there is a patchwork. Does that make sense? It makes you feel like the cinema is dying, which is not very good. Then, go to buy some popcorn, of course, classic. And they did something very smart, which was they have a bucket program. It's kind of like Six Flags. If you've ever been to Six Flags, you can get those drinks, and you can refill it infinitely for the rest of the year, but you pay $20 for a bottle. You know what I mean? Or $30 or however much it is. You can buy a popcorn bucket that functions like that. So like I can't remember how much I paid for it, like $20 or something, for a popcorn bucket, which kind of pays for itself if you get a large popcorn, like two times it already pays for itself, and 3 times you're in the profit zone, right? This is smart. Gets people wanting to come back to take advantage of their bucket, while also getting money up front when they're cash strapped. It's a good idea from a business perspective to do this bucket. I'm surprised that hasn't happened before, or maybe I wasn't aware of it. I don't know. What really irked me about it was they charged $2 extra for a lid for that bucket.
Did you buy the lid?
I did buy the lid.
Oh, you actually bought the lid.
The bucket wasn't
the
that
benefit of the lid.
Yeah, wait. How do you want a lid?
so you don't end up spilling your pop. So you can take their popcorn home. I guess that's one of the benefits, but also so you don't spill the contents of your popcorn bucket while you're shuffling around. But particularly because Steph was good.
Popcorn, I like by default, like it's lidless, right? That's not the normal. Like,
That's true. That's
popcorn
true.
bucket, right?
Yeah.
So is that actually an issue? I never even thought of that.
Not really. Steph is going to use it as a berry picking bucket as well, so
okay.
it helps with that. That
This just
aspect
makes a lot more sense. Okay.
So it had a dual purpose for us. But the funny part about this this thing, it's like, don't do that. Don't nickel and dime people. Like, it's not good for people's feeling when they walk into a theater to be nickel and dimed. I'm going to be talking about this when I talk about how theaters should change. But when you do this to people, when you say it's $2 extra for a bucket, the first thing people think is, what a cheapskate. You know? Like, like, it's just a bad brand. And when your business is already basically concessions only and the ticket comes last, you're selling the movie last, you're selling concessions first, it really doesn't help your case that you give a flying hoot about movies themselves when you make commercials saying AMC cares about movies, and then you walk in and they're like, hey, you have to pay $2 for a lid. Like, come on. Like, gotta stop that. Either just make the bucket $2 more and give everyone a lid if that's what it takes. I don't understand that. Like, the bucket is not so expensive that adding $2 more, or it just wouldn't make a difference, like, functionally.
How much was the bucket?
I feel like it was $20, like, or something like that. Like, $22 is like, that's the same thing to most people. Like, why don't you just do that? Like, it makes no sense. 2, just don't don't give a lid then if it's such a big issue to you. Like, I don't know.
Well, I think it's not that the lid isn't a big issue, but that, like, it's just, you know, it's for extra money, not that the lid actually isn't worth $2 at all.
And that's the problem. Yeah,
they
exactly.
probably if they couldn't make money off the lid, they probably wouldn't sell the lid. You know.
Yeah,
Or rather, if they couldn't break even on the lid, even if they could break even on the lid, they probably wouldn't bother selling the lid. Is my guess. You know, my guess is that like the lid only was an idea because they realized, oh, as a way of making money, not because people need a lid. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's crazy. It's crazy. The other thing that bothers me about this bucket, right, is they put literally negative 10% effort on the design of the bucket. The bucket is such plain, and you might not think this is a big deal, but you're selling a seasonal bucket. It literally expires by a certain time, and you have to buy. You know, it's not annual in the sense that when I buy it, a year from when I buy it, it's dead. There's a season for it, right? So it expires in like, I can't remember, like January or something like this, like maybe at year's end or something. But if I buy the bucket now, it's not like I get a whole year from now. It expires, so it represents 2023. So why wouldn't you theme your buckets so they become collector's items? Like, I don't understand that. That's just like an obvious play. Like, it's just so... The fact that they can't think this much, like, about simple business stuff like this gives me such little hope for their chances of survival, that they can't theme a bucket, which would cost them literally nothing more, because all they... Like, I mean, I would like a whole sculpture of a bucket, if that's what you can do, to really solidify this idea. But at the very least, the graphic design... You're printing on the bucket anyway, you know? All you have to do is have some intern make a nice, unique design for the bucket, you know? For this year, so that every year looks unique and fresh and different, so that people want to collect these. Like, it's simple crap like this that, like, bothers me so much about the theater industry. They just don't get it. They don't get it at all. And the last thing I have to rant about the theater experience was my particular theater that I went into. I think the audio was retrofitted, upgraded at some point, and then retrofitted, which is fine. Okay, great. It sounded great. It sounded phenomenal. No complaints about the sound of the theater, which is a huge reason to go to the theater to begin with, because you can't get sound like that at home. Like, almost anyone can't get sound like that at home. So, not mad at that. Was a little annoyed that during the previews, when the lights are on, that the light is right next to one of the retrofitted speakers, and that light casted a shadow on the screen. Like, on, like, a third of the screen.
A third of the screen? Wow.
Yeah.
I see what you mean, like a faint shadow. Like, it'd be crazy if it was, like, black, but...
Yeah,
that's kind of
definitely very noticeable, you know, but not like...
Wow.
Yeah, not black, but like very
It
noticeable.
seems like, I don't know, it's like the thing, like it's like I don't know, like the screen is just like the most important part of that. You know
No, this is during the previews though, because that's when that light is on. That's right next to the speaker.
Oh, okay.
So it's not happening the whole film. So that
Okay.
it's just a nitpick. That's kind of a nitpick because it's not necessary to remove it. But like it's kind of like an overall care thing, right? Like if you notice that that's happening, you should just fix it. Like like it's just an overall care issue, you know. It shows that you don't care, you know. The second image problem I had, though, this one's actually egregious, is during the film, the exit light for one of the emergency exits, you know, they're always up front near the screen, you're always visible, and they never bother me, normally. But this particular light is at a 90-degree angle to the screen, which means, like, you know, yeah, it's not, like, in most theaters I go to, it's, like, parallel with the screen, so, like, you know, it's facing you, right, the exit light. In this particular case, it's at a 90-degree angle to the screen, and it's kind of close to it. So, some of this red light is washing some of the right part of the screen. It's getting onto the screen. The exit light's getting onto the screen. It's insane. In dark screen scenes, it's extremely distracting. Like, it looks bad. It looks very, very bad. And it's like, it's such a, like a, literally someone just has to go and, like, think about how to solve it. Like, someone has to put effort into being like, well, we need the exit light. So, you know, that's just necessary. But, like, you know, we've got to do something about how it's washing onto the screen.
They have, like, exit arrows, like, you know, and if you're in like a building, sometimes the exit sign has an arrow pointing to the direction, so you could just make it parallel, right, and have an arrow pointing to the right.
Well, okay, maybe I mean, I assume the exit sign specifically is required by law, you know, for like fire escape.
No, I'm saying maybe
whatever.
like I don't know the exact requirements, but I'm saying like in a building, you know, oftentimes, well, I guess maybe you always see the exit above the door. Yeah, there's also those exit signs that are just in the hallway that point to the direction where, you know, the nearest door is.
No,
right?
so it wasn't that. It was actually just over the exit door.
I know. I'm saying. I'm wondering, maybe this is not like legal, but I was wondering if maybe you could replace that with a, you know, essentially one of those signs that just points there. So it's like parallel to the screen, but it points to the right. So the door's there, but it might be required that there has to be one above the door or something like that.
Yeah, I have no clue. But what I do know is even if it's required to be there, you could simply add a flap to the side of the screen that angularly blocks the light from washing onto the screen. It would not look great if the lights are on and you care, I guess. It wouldn't look beautiful. But the more important thing is that the light doesn't wash onto the screen. Whatever you do, the light shouldn't wash onto the screen. You know, however you solve that problem. So, very irked by that experience. It's very annoying to see Jim Caviezel at the end of the movie give one of the best pitches for cinema, and the cinema I'm sitting in cannot uphold that pitch itself. Frustrating. Very frustrating. He's got people to clap for him. That's crazy. But the cinema itself doesn't seem to care that much. So, it's very frustrating. We're going to have to talk about that on a different episode at length. But, yeah, that's my thoughts on Sound of Freedom. 3.5 out of 5, probably. definitely a timely film in terms of its attraction, and one that I think if you don't want to watch anything Disney, definitely worth your time, but not anything that's going to blow your mind and like take your soul to a new place or something. That's not going to happen.
Two things.
Yeah.
First, while you were talking, I got a notification on Facebook that I guess church here, somebody is rented in a local theater and an entire showing of it with for the church. Does it have a particularly religious aspect to it?
So that's something I didn't really talk about. So no asterisk. So it doesn't, but so I should say there's one or two lines of dialogue that hint to the idea that the main character is a devout Christian of some sort, right? It is not explored really beyond that terribly much, besides a few references to his own personal faith. So there's that. But I will say that because of the way the film is marketed, that makes a lot of sense that they're doing that, because they created a portal for you to buy tickets for other people. Very intelligent viral marketing. They used the fact that the film was suppressed by Disney and the film had so many issues going to market. They used that momentum to create viral action to counteract it. That is the smart decision. That is very smart.
Regarding the Christian thing, it's also Jim himself, right? So.
Oh yeah, Jim Caviezel himself, obviously. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah. And I can't remember which other filmmaker, but yeah. So, yeah, it's that why can't indie people take a page from this, understand what they did, copy paste. Copy paste. If you want to fight the big studios, there's only one way. Angel Studios is basically nothing compared to the big giants, and they did it. And that's the thing I guess that matters to me the most about this film, is that they were able to overcome, very strong forces, in the film industry, and they were only able to do that because they tried their darndest and had good ideas as to how to do that. One of them is viral marketing. Very smart viral marketing campaign. And that's why someone bought out a church to show it. That's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah. I've never seen that before around here, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just also, I just want to clarify in case it's not 100% clear, that I think what I said at the beginning, you were talking about the first shot, and I said I meant it in a very darkly sarcastic way that and I said that it sounds like a really fun way to start a film. I mean that as in a really disturbing way, as in too disturbing for me to watch. So yes, I just to clarify that.
Oh, I understood that. Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, just clarifying.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very it's not a fun watch in any sense of that word. Very dark. There you go. That's my segment. So I'm gonna grab a battery and Nathan can start his segment.
All right.
Let me transition us over. Here we go.
Mixed Media Gaming.
Hello and welcome to Mixed Media Gaming. Today's a little bit of a strange Mixed Media podcast episode. We have 3 topics instead of a review and arguing with Reddit. So if you've been watching before and you're confused, well, now you understand. I'll be doing a topic as well. I'll be talking about, the thumbnail hasn't changed, but I will not be talking about Sound of Freedom. That's what Irving talked about before. I'll be talking about, I don't remember what Irving made the exact title, but, Spirit of Indie Games versus AAA. I'll be talking about AAA and indie games. Obviously, there's a lot of there's a lot of very, I guess, almost stereotypical things one could say from a game developer's perspective on these things. It's very common for people to be like, oh, indie games, they're always better than AAA games or something like that. I'm more I'll sort of go down through a rabbit hole of like a random thought I had that led to a bunch of other thoughts pretty recently. But yeah, before I get into that, let's reintroduce ourselves. So I'm Nathan Nestor. I'm a 3D modeler and a game developer.
Hi, I'm Ben Costello. I'm a flute player and media composer.
And I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes.
My name is Irving Nestor. I'm a filmmaker and media entrepreneur based out of Mount Carmel, Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm. All right. And before I get into it, I don't want to forget, because I'm probably going to forget. I had a random podcast idea, not related to this at all. But I don't remember what, I think some term. Oh yeah, I was doing research and whatever, and I came across the Wikipedia page for the term grinding in a video game, right? And I was like, interesting as Wikipedia page for that, because it's like in my mind that was like a common term, like it's such a normal it's kind of like, I don't know, it's like it's just a word as any, I guess, being absorbed into the game culture, I guess. But then it occurred to me that there are certain terms I might say that people probably don't understand, but they don't clarify them, because I just don't think it's like abnormal. So I don't know if like grinding is a thing that people have heard of outside of the game dev community, or not the game dev community specifically, outside of the gamer community, I guess. But yeah, my podcast idea was just a podcast where we take some obscure terms and we try to guess what they mean from each other's mediums. But yeah,
That would be interesting.
yeah. But yeah, I just wanted to get that off my chest before I forgot. So yeah, I'll get into it now. So yeah, so it all kind of started when I noticed the game BattleBit Remastered, which is a strange start to a podcast episode, because it's not like it is. I don't know. I guess it doesn't really matter, because most people probably don't know what that is. But yeah, I posted about BattleBit Remastered in Discord not too long ago. I mentioned it in the last podcast briefly. I was like, why is this game suddenly very popular? Never heard of it. Suddenly, it's one of the top 10 most played games concurrently at the moment. Right now, it's sitting at number 10 with 54,000 players. And I'm thinking, like, where did this come from? What is it? Like, I'm looking at it, I'm like, this doesn't look like that crazy. Like, what could have caused it to become that popular, right? And my friend was like, got it, and so I got it as well to play with him. And it's only $15. So I was like, this is like sure, I'll just do it on a whim. Sure, why not? I haven't bought a game in a long time, I guess. So let's do it. So I got it, and I had an experience that was very strange. So some background: BattleBit Remastered. I mentioned it before, as I said before, but I guess for those who haven't seen that episode, BattleBit Remastered is typically referred to as sort of like a cross between actually it's really like a Battlefield and Roblox, which I think is a bad description. So don't hate me for that one. Roblox, in terms of its simplistic style, visual style, that is, kind of blocky, although much better looking in my opinion, very well stylized, and but Battlefield in terms of its gameplay, which I think is kind of far off, but the comparisons are definitely there, and it certainly was inspired by Battlefield, at least somewhat, even if I think saying Battlefield meets Roblox will give people the wrong impression when they play it, and it's like, oh, that's not really what that is at all, actually. But yeah, so 54K players on right now. Number 10 on leaderboard, top 10 most concurrently played games on Steam, and right now it's 10 p.m. Eastern time, so that's like sort of probably hitting a low point in terms of when people are playing, at least approaching that. And I found it unexpectedly fun. I played 15 hours in the past 8 days, which is kind of high for me as someone who doesn't play video games as much as I used to anymore. Maybe back in the day that was nothing, 15 hours easy. But nowadays, 15 hours in 8 days is not something that happens regularly. So why would this game, out of anything, cause that to happen? Well, it really, at first glance looks kind of like a generic shooter, and that's where the Battlefield comparisons come. But then I was thinking, this kind of reminds me of almost like a blockbuster movie, but for games, where it's like kind of like stupid fun. And I don't mean like stupid in like a this is lesser than type thing. You know what I'm saying? But I don't know, very I don't know how to describe it. I don't want to say cheap, because that's not what I'm trying to say. like the things that make it fun are very simple, um, very simple, very easy, fun for the whole family type thing. You know what I'm saying? Where it's like anybody can get down with this kind of, maybe not literally anybody, but a large portion of people can get down with this. It's not hard to understand. It doesn't have a high skill ceiling. It's like it's. I want to say generic, but that once again sounds bad. It's not generic. It is just simple. I guess that's really just the best way of describing what I'm going to say. It is simple fun. So I guess not stupid fun. It is simple fun. But the more I thought about this, I thought like, okay, well, maybe this isn't like an exact analogy to like the blockbuster movies, because typically with the blockbuster, like or really, I guess always the blockbuster, not only is it simple fun, but it's also high budget, right? It's like one of the things. It's like, ooh, there's like fancy like things on the screen and stuff like that, and fancy sounds and visuals, and it's part of the blockbuster experience or whatever, right? But Battlefield Remastered is quite the opposite. It's very very simple graphics, and nothing to be like, oh wow, that's crazy technology in terms of the visuals. It's very simple. So that I thought, okay, what actually is like more like the blockbuster version of video games? Maybe that's something more like Battlefield, actually, where it is also simple fun, but it actually has that sort of high budget look to it, right? Because it is high budget. And then I thought, okay, but is it stupid fun? Because when you think about Battlefields, right? Battlefields have gone up and down over time, right? There are some towards the beginning of the Battlefield's history tends to be pretty highly acclaimed. You got Battlefield, what's it called? Battlefield 2148. Is that the futuristic one? That was kind of like meh. A lot of people thought it was meh. I think it's 2148. I don't remember the exact year. It was 2148 because it takes place a century after 2048. Okay, so. Yeah, that one came out, but then it was great, and then Hardline came out, and people were like, it's okay, but it's still good, and then that died very quickly. But then, it kept progressing, and then we got Battlefield 1, and everyone was like, wow, this is peak Battlefield or whatever, although many may disagree, many say Battlefield Company 2 is peak Battlefield, but then you get to Battlefield 5, and people go, wow, this is trash, actually. And there was a little bit of like that, this is a little bit trash with Battlefield 4 at the start of it, with how buggy it was, stuff like that. But it has come back. Battlefield 5 never really recovered. At the time, I thought this seems kind of irrational, because these games aren't all that different. So it's very hard for me to think, how could Battlefield go from amazing game from Battlefield 1, which, by the way, if you never played Battlefield or don't know the series, the numbering is all messed up. So Battlefield 1 is not the first one. It's like, I don't know what number it is. It's very far into the Battlefield series. And then after Battlefield 1 is Battlefield 5. So I should have explained that before. And Battlefield 5 is not the fifth Battlefield. It is further than that as well. Irving, you're muted, I think.
Sorry. when they released Battlefield 1, they really royally effed up their naming scheme entirely, because it's Battlefield 1 for World War 1, which is...
Yes. Why didn't they call it World War 1? I don't know. Battlefield WW1. Well, we have... I don't know, maybe it's two... Well, we have COD MW 1 and 2. That can't be that crazy then, because that can't be that like hard of a name. I feel like MW2 rolls off the tongue, Maybe WW2 or WW1 doesn't, I guess. I don't know.
I don't know. Figure something else out.
Anything else. I don't know. It's crazy that, spending probably, dozens of $1 million on a game, you can't name it, but okay. And then Battlefield 5, I can't remember why it's called it's called Battlefield 5 because it's the sequel to Battlefield 4. Battlefield 4 is not the fourth Battlefield. And it came out before 1. It came out before Hardline. Wait, did it come out before Hardline? Yeah. Wait, was it 3 Hardline 4 or 3 4 Hardline? 3.
Dude, I don't remember.
I think it's 3 Hardline 4. Because of how it used to be, I don't think it's like this anymore. It used to be big game, small game, big game, alternating. So Hardline was a small game. 3 and 4 would be the bigger games that sandwiched it, I think. So, anyways, the whole name scheme is
Yeah, who thought of that?
I don't know. The first one is battle. The first one it made sense for some time. The first one was Battlefield 1942. It's the year it takes place. It's very simple, you know.
So for Battlefield 1, couldn't have done like Battlefield 1915, whatever year you want, 1914?
Yeah, actually, that would be a way better name, honestly, in my opinion. I don't know. And interesting, there is no. So there's a Battlefield 2, but there's no Battlefield. Okay. So we went from Battlefield 1942 to something. I forget. Something's after that. It's another year. I'm pretty sure. Then we go to Battlefield 2. Is 2 the next one?
Yeah.
But why is it called 2? Because there's no 1.
Dude,
I guess I can understand why the second one would be 2, but you're saying
no, that's the third one. That's
right.
That's the third
right.
one.
I'm saying I understand if it's the second one. But...
Wait, why is the second Battlefield called Battlefield 2? I never actually thought about that. Why is Battlefield 2 called 2? The other ones you can at least come up with a contrived reason why, right? I actually don't know where 2 comes from. Maybe I'm wrong and that is the second, but I don't think so. I think the second one's a year as well, and then it's 2. I don't know. Anyways, but that's besides the point. The whole thing's a mess. But so the important part is Battlefield 1 came out, most successful Battlefield by sales, and then Battlefield 5 came out after that, and that did not do well in terms of reviews. And I thought it seems quite rational because these games don't really change that much game after game, especially because we're going from World War I to World War II. So it's like we're not like even like going from like World War I to like the future or something like that. You know what I'm saying?
Battlefield 5 is World War II?
Yeah, isn't it?
Oh, I forgot that game existed. Wow.
Wow. Yeah, I remember it.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Oh my gosh.
I remember, what a strange era in gaming, man. I remember because it was like, because COD.
Yeah, so it's Battlefield 1942, then Battlefield Vietnam, then Battlefield 2.
Wow, that's Vietnam. Wow,
that's crazy.
Yeah, so Battlefield 2 is the third game.
Jeez. That doesn't make any sense.
Also, like, you know, with Battlefield 5, right, they had an obvious play of at least taking the 2 eyes of World War II and, like, making it a V. They didn't even do that.
Oh, yeah, no.
They didn't make it make sense.
Yeah. It's also, like, I don't know. A video game is, like, it's also... I don't like how COD Modern Warfare 2... I understand it's a remastered version, but there's no... Like, if you look at the name COD Modern Warfare 2, right? So there's 2 COD Modern Warfare 2s, right? There's the first one, and then there's the second one, right? There's the first one, which is the original, obviously. The second one is the remastered version. Okay, so I understand, we name it the same thing or something like that, right? Or something, right? But at least append remastered to it, so that when I look at it, it's not ambiguous, you know what I'm saying? I'm looking at it on some random website or whatever, and it's like some statistics web page, I'm like, which one am I looking at here, you know? If there's no date, I don't know.
So I guess Battlefield 3 and 4 are direct sequels to Battlefield 2. But I
think so.
But why is Battlefield 2 Battlefield 2?
I don't. Maybe it's supposed to be a sequel to the first one that's not called Battlefield 1?
Well, here's the thing, though.
I don't know.
Here's the thing. Battlefield 3 is not... Like, it's a sequel only in the sense that they decided that would be the next in that line for an arbitrary reason. Like for the arbitrary reason that they've decided it. Because there are games in between. Like,
This Bad Company is in between.
Yeah, Bad Company 2 is in between, or Bad Company 1 and 2 are in between. Mm-hmm. And Battlefield 3 has no, like, relation to Battlefield 2 thematically. So it's all a mess.
Yeah. The Wikipedia claims that Battlefield 2 is in some ways a sequel to Battlefield Vietnam, but whatever that means.
I wonder if the story maybe includes like a character from Vietnam, you know, progressing. I don't know. Maybe
no one plays Battlefield for the stories. Except maybe Bad Company 2. That was the only time they wrote a decent story.
Yeah, I don't know. Battlefield. Yeah, then it goes 20. So it goes Battlefield 1942, Battlefield Vietnam, Battlefield 2, Battlefield 2142, Battlefield Bad Company, Battlefield Bad Company 2. There's also like in between. So I'm skipping some like Battlefield Heroes and Battlefield Play for Free and whatever, right? But then there's
apparently the first one, Battlefield 1942, is a prequel.
Oh, that's how they
to
explain.
Is it a
Battlefield
prequel to
Vietnam.
1943?
So
Oh,
Battlefield
it's a
Vietnam is functionally Battlefield 1. Battlefield 2 is a sequel to Battlefield Vietnam.
That sounds like a retcon to me.
3. I'm just going off what Wikipedia says. So.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, Bad Company 1, Bad Company 2.
Also,
Battlefield
since when were
3.
the events of 1942 a prequel to Vietnam? Oh, that's funny. That's hilarious. Sorry, continue.
Oh, 3 and 4 are back to back. Okay, Hardline is not between. It goes 4, Hardline 1. That's what happened.
They're a mess.
Yeah, so you got 3, 4 Hardline 1, 5, 20, 42. So, yeah. Anyways, I forget why we were talking about that. Oh yeah, because I was mentioning how that,
Oh.
sorry, I was mentioning how Battlefield. Wait, 1 and 5. Yeah, I was trying to clarify. Yeah, so 1 goes first, then 5. Yeah, 1 highly acclaimed, 5 not so much. And I forgot what I was saying now.
You're asking why because you're saying there's similar games.
Yeah. And then so after 5 comes out, 2042 comes out. And people were like, oh, this is also kind of bad. And part of it was like the glitchiness, but then Battlefield 4 was also glitchy at the start of it. So I'm like, what has changed? This seems very similar and very arbitrary. So yeah, that made me question is Battlefield like part of like, is it the equivalent of a blockbuster? Because okay, yeah, there are bad blockbusters, but okay, I was about to say this is definitely wrong. I was about to say that if you have blockbuster as good, typically the sequel's also good. But then I thought of Jurassic Park, and I thought, never mind, that is not true.
No.
According to Wikipedia, Battlefield 2, in its release in 2005, was notable for its glitchiness requiring a large number of patches.
Wow.
Okay, so maybe it's every Battlefield with a normal number is like that. That might be how they're numbering them, But yeah, so I thought back to like earlier days, before a lot of people say games are better back in the back in the day or whatever. I'm just not old enough to have experienced the GameCube, I guess. But technically I think I am. Like that could have been a thing I did, but I didn't. So in my day was browser games and the DS, right? I think about times like that and like have things changed since then? And it's like, I was younger, right? So I feel like anything was entertaining, kind of, in some sense, But there was definitely like I feel like a difference in care that was taken for games like being functional, for one, right? Because that's like what the main complaint of Battlefield, right? Is that like, or not? That's not the main complaint. Maybe that is a big complaint. Is that oftentimes it's not functional, right? But you think about, I mentioned this before with like DS games and other similar cartridge type game systems where you can't update the game, or I guess, you can't update the game once it's out there, right? So the game has to work. You technically, I'm sure this has happened before. You can release updated versions of the cartridge, but people who already bought the original cartridge already have that, right? That's what they have, and that's what they're stuck with. I guess they could rebuy the thing or whatever, but that's obviously not going to leave a good taste in their mouth, right? So you have to get it right. And with browser games, I also felt, I don't know, I think, okay, maybe it's because I'm younger, but these are definitely a lot of like, simple fun games as well. You know what I'm saying? Where it's like they felt like, the blockbuster in a way, and sort of like, that quality, even though they weren't necessarily high budget. Even like, cheap Steam games too. I feel like a lot of them have that sort of quality. So I'm thinking like, okay, how is it that a series like Battlefield with dozens of millions of dollars, maybe over $100 million, I wouldn't be surprised, for a game, By the way, Battlefield doesn't publish their, or I should say, DICE doesn't publish their budget, so I do not know what the actual budget is. But yeah, how is it that like something like that? It seems sort of inversely proportional. So I want to look at like the AAA versus indie thing, and I want to look at, is there actually a trend in like the quality of games being bad the higher the price, the higher the budget is, because that's something that's typically said. When you look at like the highest cost games, I only picked the top 5, which, you know, these are outliers to be clear. You know, these are far outliers of AAA. AAA is already an outlier, right? But can you? I'm curious. Can you guys guess any of the top 5 most costly games, inflation adjusted?
To produce?
Yes.
I don't know. I would guess something in Battlefield.
Well, they don't publish, so I should say published.
Okay, sorry.
Unlike movies, it's not like in movies. I feel like it's pretty ubiquitous. You know, you kind of just know. With video games, is not like that.
I mean, who publishes their game budget?
Apparently, I mean, this list has a lot. I assume that like the list I'm looking at, it's from Wikipedia. A lot of these top games probably part of their selling point. Is my guess. You know. Which is ironic because a lot of these games are not well reviewed. So,
GTA.
GTA 4 is on the list, but it's not top 5. The list is of the Wikipedia list is like video games that have sold.
I'm trying to think of like it's got to be something with like a lot of technology, a lot of assets. Like, you know, I maybe I can't think of it, but this is gonna annoy me when you say the top 5.
All right, I'll start with number 5. This one is probably potentially the most surprising. But recall this is inflation adjusted. Is Halo 2. That costs 248 million USD inflation adjusted.
Wow.
Which is crazy because it's Halo 2. None of that's bad. I'm just saying. No, it's you know, it is aged. But Halo 2 is a game that actually had critical reviews, and it's like, okay, it seems like at least that was good, right? That's cool. But that falls into a older category of games. I want to say Halo 2 came out in 2009, but I might be making that up. I have no idea. I don't know why that number stands out to me. Halo 2. Halo 2 came out in 2004. Okay, I was somewhat close. But number 4, Irving, you could probably guess this one.
I don't know.
It's The Last of Us Part 2. That's what it is.
Oh, that makes sense.
Last of Us Part 2, $249 million, and is one of the most polarizing games ever, right, in terms of reviews. Critics love it, everyone else hates it, pretty much. So this was not a good sign. I was looking at this. I was like, huh, interesting. Yeah. Last of Us Part 2, a lot of money. It's like, and it wasn't even like something that everyone could get down with, which was interesting, you know. Not that, you know, I wouldn't consider The Last of Us 2 even like a blockbuster type, trying to get that sort of blockbuster type success where it's like a fun for the whole family type experience. You know what I'm saying?
No, definitely not.
That's not what that is, you know. But it's, you know, it is like I haven't played it, but some of the decisions they made, I'm like, this seems very strange and not something you would do if you were betting $249 million on something. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Number 3 is Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, the original, not the remaster. The remaster budget is unknown, so I don't know what that is. $335 million, also a critical acclaim.
Guess that.
Yeah, I wouldn't have either. But also a critical acclaim. You know, so okay, so we have 2 well-received older games, and The Last of Us Part 2 is a little bit of a stinker, I guess, and in that one. Number 2 is crazy. Number 2 is Cyberpunk 2077. A game that did not work on launch. Did not work on launch. Not work on launch. Well, this game was in development for just like a decade, for a very long time, and released in 2020. When did it start being made? I'll find it off the top very quickly. But sorry, I was looking for it, but I can't find it. $357 million, and it didn't work. And it was delayed multiple times, right? So we're 2 for 2 here. Or sorry, we're 2 for 4 here in terms of games that have severely underperformed in terms of budget. And number 1 is this one. This is the classic. It's Star Citizen, a game that
that makes sense.
The game isn't released yet. The game is not released yet. And
it's not done. It's never done.
It's not done. This doesn't bode well.
This says that Cyberpunk 2077 they started consulting in 2012.
Wow.
2012, right? So it was like 8 years or something like that. 8 years with delays. The game didn't work. That's crazy. For $357 million, by the way.
And they brought everyone on a hype train, like one of the craziest hype trains that the internet has ever saw.
I will never buy Cyberpunk 2077, and I will probably never buy a CD Projekt product because of that. It's crazy.
Does the budget include marketing?
Yes, the budget includes marketing.
Okay.
So it actually splits it in Wikipedia, which is very nice. So the marketing of Cyberpunk 2077 is $142 million, and then the remaining development cost is $174 million. So they knew the game was broken, and they just spent $142 million on marketing.
Wow, that's incredible! Wow, one of the biggest farces in internet history.
Yep. Star Citizen. Can you guess the number, inflation adjusted?
I don't know. Is it $500 million? Because that'd be insane.
It is over $500 million.
Oh my goodness, $500 million. That's insane. I don't
Well,
even know
it's
what
not
to say.
something like Tetris, inflation adjusted to like.
Yeah, what Tetris is like. Well, Star Citizen, I don't even know when Star Citizen is it's from 2012, right? It's been about a decade. So yeah, it's been about a decade, and you burned through $500 million.
It's still not done.
It's technically not done, even though they're releasing DLC currently as we speak. But
Also, with that one, when it was coming out in 2012-ish time period, I remember that because the hype train was also pretty crazy for it as well. Yeah, and they did not deliver.
No, not really.
I mean, there are fans of it right now, but for different reasons than there were people hyped for it, back then.
Right. Yeah. Man, I remember watching a video semi-recently, maybe a year ago, from Star Citizen's channel, YouTube channel about development. I'm thinking man, it's all this technology and stuff like that. Man, this is not gonna finish. I don't know. And if you're wondering, this is a tangent, but if you're wondering, one of the big reasons why Star Citizen has never fulfilled its promise of having massively, because to this day, 10 years later, they don't have a massively multiplayer world. The cap on the players in the world is small. It's relatively small. I forget what it is, but it's less than you would think probably. But the reason why is because they're using a custom engine, if I recall correctly. Either a custom engine or an old engine. It might be, I was say, either custom or old. It might be CryEngine, and CryEngine has a capacity. Yes, CryEngine has a capacity on the amount of players you can have in a world. So their idea was we'll stitch together multiple servers and have a seamless experience like that. And they have never to this day been able to do it. So, but the issue is they're $500 million deep in an engine. So, do you switch now or what do you do? I don't know.
They're just crazy.
Yeah, is a ruse, but I don't know. This game only supports Windows. It's kind of funny. $500 million. But yeah, so I was like, okay, these numbers, this doesn't bode too well for the modern AAA, right? Maybe for the old AAA, it was kind of okay. I think Star Citizen is an outlier as a game that is borderline a scam. So I don't know, it's just different. But if you look at the whole list from Wikipedia and you sort it by year, it's when you look at the most recent games, it's by recency you have Star Citizen, you have Horizon Forbidden West, okay, well-reviewed game. You have Cyberpunk 2077, The Last of Us Part 2, Genshin Impact, which a lot of people like, but is I have heavy disdain. So it's a gacha game. So I was about to explain what that is, but I'll leave that for the terminology episode.
Okay.
I don't know do you already know what that is?
No.
Okay, good. All right, we'll leave that like that. And then there's Kingdom Under Fire 2, which is a lesser-known South Korean game that never released. burned $62 million. Oh, sorry, it released and immediately shut down. So it was announced to shut down before it released, by the way. They said, hey, we're shutting down servers, released it, then shut down the servers. So that's what happened with that. Shadow of the Tomb Raider, which I believe has decent reviews. But yeah, then you get back and, then it's like, okay, we're kind of entering, Oh, Battlefield 4 has a known budget of $100 million. Okay. Oh, 126 inflation adjusted. Okay. Interesting. So yeah, Battlefield 4 is up there. It was also broken on launch, by the way. So, the common trend seems to be a thing. So then I was like, okay, these are kind of like outliers. What if I look at my own catalog of games, right? And I try to make some patterns here and see what's up. So if I look at my top 5 games on backlogs, we have Rocket League, Tomb Raider 2013, Overcooked 2, Battlefront 2, the second Battlefront 2, another great naming scheme, I guess, and RimWorld. Rocket League, obviously the game is a live service game, so the amount of money that it spent has racked up over time. But in terms of initial development, it was $2 million, and it took, I think, 2 years or something like that to create it. Now, that sounds like a lot of money, but in the grand scheme of these AAA games, it's not that much money, right? As you can see, by hundreds of millions of dollars here. $2 million is not that much, it seems. Tomb Raider 2013 was $100 million. Overcooked 2 was 3 devs, and presumably not in the millions, probably not in the 100,000s, probably not in the 10,000s. Maybe in the thousands, maybe if they pulled together their money and their savings, or whatever. Battlefront 2, the second one, unknown how much, but you can bet it's a lot of money. Given that, one, they had to at least just get the license to use Star Wars IP, right? So they went all out on that one. And then RimWorld, which was 6 devs, I think it was 6 or 7. I think it was 6 devs. Probably didn't spend that much money, And so I tried to figure out, so okay, how is it that you can have such different amounts of resources poured into something, but I can get essentially I can say, okay, I like Battlefront 2 as much as RimWorld, and I don't even like Battlefront 2 because it's good. I like it because it's glitchy and the glitches are fun. That's literally the reason. Okay, so it's not in terms of the intended value is bad. The intended value is definitely bad in Battlefront 2. It is not as it was marketed, is not close to the experience people were probably expecting, right? Yeah, so I think a lot of it has to do with focus. So that's something that's not a secret or whatever, right? A lot of people will say, well, the AAA games, spend too much money on fancy graphics and stuff like that, and then the game just ends up sucking because they spend $2 and everything else. I don't know if this is the full truth, because it's very hard for me to believe that they spent $249 million of The Last of Us on just graphics, and the rest of it sucked because of that. You know what I'm saying? It seems like a lot of that was just story-driven stuff. So it's someone made a decision, and it wasn't a monetary decision necessarily, but maybe there was something to do with money there. But even if it was 2 dudes in their basement making this game, right? Assuming they could do something like that, the decision could have still been made. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't seem to have been up to money or whatever. But there are certain things like AAA studios seeming to be more risk averse, which sounds kind of strange, right? Because they have the ability to take on more risk, right? Seemingly, because they have more money. So take RimWorld, for example. RimWorld has insane procedural generation. That's the cool part of it, is that every world is procedurally generated, and it has you can sort of come up with your own stories for the worlds based on the open-ended, but still not detailed, I guess vast, I'll say. Vast procedural generation that leaves enough space for developing your own stories and stuff like that. And a lot of the procedural generation development is done in the indie dev sphere, which is kind of strange, because it's okay, you have this whole group of people. We talked about procedural generation a lot in the Discord. You have people who love procedural generation, people not even just procedural generation specific fans, people who would enjoy a game that utilized it in a good way, and you have all these indie devs doing that. But then you think about on the AAA side, it's you think about these titles, how many of these things are there actually, and they actually do things in an innovative way, not something simple here's a weapon with randomly generated stats. Wow, isn't that crazy? Loot tables and stuff like that, where it's your weapon has a chance, you pick it up, has a chance of having like plus or minus 5 damage. Great, that's not the procedural generation that's particularly interesting or innovative. I guess you could say that small devs have nothing to lose in a sense, right? It's like, well, you're already starting from the ground. You know what I'm saying? You can't really get lower than that, I guess. Of course you burn your time and stuff like that too, and you can burn money as well. But if you have hundreds of $1 million in store, you can lose all that. If you have $0 put into it, you can't lose. Well, you could lose all $0, which is not an issue, right? But that being said, there is the AAA big monetary risk, right? And so you would think that it'd make them like not spend boatloads of money on these types of things, right? Especially when it seems like nobody it's like very rare that people actually want these types of things, right? So going back to the original thing of like Battlefield Remastered and how this kind of goes full circle is like I'm thinking, okay, so Battlefield 4 we saw spend $100 million on an experience, and then there are people who are playing Battlefield Remastered being like, this is like a Battlefield replacement for me. That certainly didn't cost $100 million. You know what I'm saying? And so it's like, did Battlefield 4 have to cost $100 million? Almost certainly not. Like there are definitely things that like went on that didn't need to happen. Maybe a lot of company waste is no secret. a lot of garbage that happened probably, and a lot of probably excess. There's this like. In AAA, there's this like undying like want for like the most realistic graphics known to man. And this is kind of interesting because I feel like people used to say this to me, and I was like, "Nah, you're crazy. Like this stuff looks cool." You know what I'm saying? And I've said this before. That Battlefield 3 is like one of the coolest games to me because in 2010 or 11 or something like 12, I don't know, something around those 3 years, it came out, and it came out with like probably the best graphics we've ever seen, and at that time it was crazy, But that's innovation, right? That's the difference. Now we're seeing hundreds of $1 million poured into things that kind of look the same or marginally better, and it's like, why are we here? You know what I'm saying? We're spending $100 million on Battlefield 4. Why are we spending $357 million on Cyberpunk 2077, which doesn't work? It's kind of strange. And then to cover up with the monetary risk, they have things like loot boxes and Roblox syndrome of like, let's consume as much debt as possible and try to survive, which cause you to do silly things like selling skins for 2 cents, which mind-boggling from Roblox, but I guess that's their business plan. You have silly things like Modern Warfare 2 Remastered being like 100 gigabytes because it has like 9 trillion skins because they have to make money somehow, and it's like, well. I one of these things where it's like, oftentimes, you gotta like think like, okay, maybe they're smarter than me, you know what I'm saying? Because they have, okay, well, this is probably the bad podcast to say this because we've probably disproved this so many times that people with money aren't necessarily smarter than than the average consumer or whatever, right? There are certain decisions that just don't make sense. So things like the amount of skins in Call of Duty, for example, it's like. Are they actually recouping that money? Are there really not enough skins? Like, is it really like the 9,001th skin is going to make someone buy it? You know what I'm saying? Like, is that really going to happen? Is someone actually going to buy that skin suddenly? I don't know. I feel like if there's a trillion skins and you're finally going to buy one after the next one, you're probably pretty far into the negative cost thing going on here. You know what I'm saying? Probably not making more money at this point. But I don't know. What do I know? Maybe I'm wrong and having that many skins is actually just worth it. But that's a focus thing, right? It's like focused on skins and stuff like that. Doesn't seem to make sense to me. So I think that's why you have this sort of like big, like this big shift in like people are like, okay, well, indie games are the way now because their focus is not in things like that, and I don't care for things like that, Some people do care for things like that, some people don't. It seems like a majority of people do not care for things like 1 million skins in a game, Not that people don't care for skins to begin with, but just the sheer amount and stuff like that, By the way, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 probably costs a couple $100 million. Doesn't even work on my computer. It doesn't work. Like, it doesn't open. No, sorry, not Modern Warfare. Warzone 2's. Warzone 2 doesn't work. So Warzone 2 replaced Warzone 1, which was a bundle of Modern Warfare 2 or whatever. It doesn't even work. It's for hundreds of millions of dollars. Thing doesn't work. You know what always works? Indie games. I don't know why. They always just work. I never think about like, oh, this might not.
Well, their
work, you know what I'm saying?
reputation like relies on it, right? Like if it fails, then if it
Well, I
doesn't
think it's
work,
'cause
then they'll never succeed.
I think maybe, but I think it's also because they're just far simpler. You know what I'm saying? Like when I think about when I develop games, I've never come into an issue where it's like, oh, this game like doesn't work on my computer. Isn't that strange? You know what I'm saying? Like that doesn't happen. It's never happened to me. Where or I give a game to someone and like, oh, it doesn't work on my computer. It's like what? It doesn't work on your computer. What's wrong with your computer? If you're developing something simple, I must wonder if it's because of things like lower level stuff so I think the issue with Call of Duty for me is a driver issue. So it's probably lower level stuff having to do with high graphical fidelity probably and stuff like that. But that's not really a worry in indie games where you make your game in Godot or Unreal or Unity and like you just click that export button and it typically just works. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Kai says in the chat, he says, indie games tend to also be less resource intensive.
That is true. So when someone wants to buy a game, they think, oh, can I run it? That's not the typical thought when you're playing indie game necessarily, because they tend to be of lower graphical fidelity, and graphics are tend to be the hog of the thing that's going to limit whether you can play a game or not. And a thought that I had with Battlefield Remastered, and I remember, I forget where I heard this from, but someone said somewhere something like, a good idea for making a game is to take an old EA game that EA trashed and then make a lower fidelity version of it. Essentially, the idea being that, a game that, not a game that was literally like bad always, but a game that was once good or something like that, and then EA trashed or whatever, right? Take the Battlefront series, for example, right? Now, obviously, that's a bad example because you can't just use Star Wars IP. But, a similar idea of like a fallen series. Say, like Mirror's Edge. Not that that's like fallen. Like, it's not like people hated Mirror's Edge Catalyst. People typically thought it was worse, right? And you can play with the same ideas, and there's no like copyright issues or anything like that. But yes, but I feel like that's what Battlefield Remastered does, is that it takes like, it's not a Battlefield clone. It is definitely in its own land, but it takes many of the concepts of Battlefield that people like, and it makes it something that anyone can play on their computers because it's not like AAA graphics, right? I didn't even think, and no one's thinking about file size, right? It's like it's probably not 100 gigabytes, probably not even dozens of gigabytes, So the barrier to entry is like non-existent, not literally, but it's relatively low when you compare it to AAA games as well. And so there's a space for indie games that AAA games just do not fill. It's not that they can't fill them, right? There's nothing saying that whatever AAA studio can't release a game that doesn't have AAA graphics. That actually happens sometimes. You know what I'm saying? It's not like say Overwatch 2, for example, or Overwatch the original. Either one, I guess. The game isn't of the greatest graphical fidelity, right? And that's kind of the point as well as a competitive shooter. But it's like that could be applied to so many games that don't actually require AAA graphics, and perhaps would lower the expense, which would lower the poor monetary practices, and also possibly make games that work on people's computers. That'd be great. You know what I'm saying? That's like the craziest thing is that at the end of the day, you can spend $350 million, charge someone $70, $60, whatever it is, right? And then the game doesn't work on their computer. It's kind of strange. But yeah, so I mean, I think that the main reason why the indie game spirit is being looked towards more fondly now than AAA is because the focus of AAA is in the wrong space. Now, I've also talked about the fact that like there's some blame to go for the consumers, and the fact that consumers typically don't like they don't influence with their money, right? They'll still buy Cyberpunk 2077 despite it being a disgrace to the gaming industry, right? Because it's a great game now, and even if it is, I don't want it. So, like the fact that games are far cheaper than they probably should be. So that is something that limits what developers can do and stuff like that. But yeah, that's generally what I think. AAA studios are very risk averse when it comes to trying new concepts out, but are not very risk averse when it comes to throwing money at problems. And indie devs are kind of the opposite way around, more out of necessity, because the uniqueness is what draws people into indie games, but they don't have that kind of money, right, to throw into things like graphics or whatever. So, yeah, that's all.
Makes a lot of sense.
At the end of my notes, I just wrote Ubisoft Uno in all caps.
Ubisoft what?
Uno?
What?
Ubisoft bought the rights to make a Uno game, and they charge money for it. You have to pay to play Uno online.
I mean, I can see that, having to pay for it, but
it's just strange that it's like it's Ubisoft Uno, man.
I mean, I guess you could, it could be like if Microsoft had bought it, just be like Solitaire, and you could play it for free, but you get ads.
I think I wrote this down because it was just like the what do you call it? Like the it's just like what do you call it? Like it's like the prime example, like the most perfect example of a AAA studio not being innovative in any way, shape, or form, and just buying Uno. People pay for Uno. It's kind of funny. And I believe, by the way, crazy. So there's like Uno and Crazy 8, right, which are essentially the same game. Like they're literally the same, as far as I'm aware.
I don't know.
Well, Crazy 8, I'm pretty sure is the same thing. Maybe with like one or two, different rules. I'm pretty sure Crazy 8 isn't like owned by anybody. I think it's a public domain thing. So I think you can just play Crazy 8 instead. But anyways, I don't know. Yeah, Ubisoft Uno exists. Oh yeah, one thought I have about innovation is like, yeah, Ubisoft is just a prime example of innovation not existing. Man, think about Watch Dogs 2014 compared to like, I don't know, like Ghost Recon Breakpoint 2019. That's 5 years, and the games feel like the same thing. That's crazy. Same thing over and over again, pretty much different theme, more or less. But there's little risk there, right? It's like you kind of know what you're getting into when you play one of those games. But I'm curious how Ubisoft is doing. I don't actually know. I don't know if they're actually like doing well or not. Because I don't know. I don't know. Well, they recently. Here's something innovative they're kind of doing. Kind of, as I mentioned, X Defiant, the Ubisoft shooter that's coming out. That is. Like, it's not innovative in the fact that it is a very generic shooter, but hey, that actually might be the sort of blockbuster type game I was talking about, where it's like actually AAA quality, and it's just stupid fun type of thing. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, it's sort of it's sort of the design choices they're making seems like they're sort of trying to. It's like they're not like literally going back to like the old days of COD, but like taking elements that people liked of the old days of COD, right? Because COD has changed quite a bit, and so it's like, hey, how about we have these parts of the old parts of COD, and not these parts, and then it's kind of a good game. And we're also using Ubisoft IP because we recycle content. I guess I don't know. I guess it's supposed to be cool. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Kai says, by the way, maybe there's an argument about the love Todd Howard et al. Put into that one. But still, it is a Bethesda game. Oh, he's talking about his prior comment. He says, I have to be careful about judging those gamers too harshly. One of my favorite games ever is Elder Scrolls Morrowind. And then he was saying, maybe there's an argument about the love Todd Howard et al. Put into that one. But still, it is a Bethesda game, bugs and all.
Yeah. I've actually never played an Elder Scrolls game ever. It's very strange. I've never played it. No. I've watched considerable amounts of Skyrim, so I understand, what it is. I've seen a bit of Morrowind as well, actually, because I think that's like one of the that might be like that's like the I feel like Morrowind and Skyrim are the ones that people talk about the most. I guess I don't have too much comment on that because I'm not too familiar with it, I guess. But I mean. From what I remember, I feel like Skyrim was considered innovative, right? Because it was like, oh wow, look at how like big it was like open world before that was like a cool thing. You know what I'm saying? it was open world when that was like not new, but like that was risky, right? That was a risky thing for it to be done. Now it's like that's part of the formula nowadays, or maybe we're a little bit past that, I guess. Not everything is open world anymore, which is kind of nice, I guess. But yeah.
Sweet. All right. Well, that was an action-packed show, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you want to take us out?
Sure. Thanks for watching this episode of the Mixed Media Podcast. If you enjoyed that, make sure to check out our other videos, other podcasts. You can find our podcast pretty much anywhere where podcasts exist. Go to mixedmediapodcast.com and you'll find a link to everywhere, including our Discord, where you can come chat with us after the podcast, which is quite nice, and get direct responses. Once again, special thanks to our, I hope to say Patreons, wow, our local supporters, K. Kairos, Rob Sharma, Post, and 909 Crime. If you too would like to gain some perks for the podcast, like using that live whiteboard right there that never gets used, but maybe one day.
Well, it happened for the first time when Post was on.
It did. I was literally thinking that. Yeah. Post, you did use it. I used it too. I forgot about it. I got to use it again. I feel like that's like the issue is like there's no one using it. Once someone starts using it, then it becomes infectious and everyone's got to use it. But anyways, so if you check out our locals page, go to mixedmediapodcast.com. We have our link to our locals there. You see all the perks that we have there, including reviewing any content that you might want us to review and stuff like that, like live whiteboard and exclusive content. So thanks for watching.
Yeah, thanks for watching and listening.
See you next week.
Look, tell a man no trouble, I don't want beef, man, I just want vibes. Big man like me, no need for the telephone hype. I got too much getting online. One rule, then I'm on site. Wrong move, I bet they gon' ride. No need for the telephone hype, nah. No need for the snoozing. Big whip outside, I'm cruising. Big stick inside, no losing. Better watch out for the snake and Judas. Don't ask them who this is. I bet they know what I'm moving in. I bet I show it into a dim. How you hate and then lose again? How you hating my vibes? Why you wasting my time? Getting hype on my line. Tell a man I don't want feedback, I just want relax. Brand new whip, two-tone, I need that brand new hit. Like lean back, brand new bits I live in. We pack, man, you never gon' like us. Get them on sight now, let them on light. That way they know I'm more righteous. Look at my life, I'm living alright. I'm nice, you know I'm alright. Cause looking like Christ, no